Okay, all right. Welcome everybody to the Aberdeen City Council Planning Committee on the 30th of April at 10 AM. Please note that the public section of this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Does anyone have an objection to this?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Can all attendees switch off their camera and put their mute microphone when not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you. I will now ask the clerk to advise the members participating today, and for all those members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that there's a clear recording of the meeting, and it can also be recorded by the clerk in the minute. There are a number of items of quasi-judicial business for the committee to consider today. Members are reminded that if they leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application, they are unable to participate or vote on that item when they return. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the room and therefore unable to determine the item. If I could ask Ms McBain, please, to do the roll call.
Thank you, Katrina. If members could just state for the recording if they are present. Councillor Bolton?
Present.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
Present.
Councillor Allen?
Present.
Councillor Cook?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
Present.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Present.
Councillor Gregg?
Present.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Present.
And Councillor Malik?
Present.
Okay, we've got all 9 members in attendance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms McBain. We'll now move on to the agenda proper. Sorry, is that okay for everyone?
Yeah.
Seems to be slight interference there. Okay, first of all, before we actually start the business, I'd just like to thank all of the members in Democratic Services for their undying patience with all of us to get us up to speed for today's meeting. There's been a lot of training required. I'd also like to thank our planning officers who have worked tirelessly to make sure that this meeting goes as smoothly as possible. So thank you all very much for your efforts in what I think are very difficult circumstances at the moment. Okay, if we could now just move on to the agenda. So can I just check that at agenda item 1.1, you all have the procedural note? Okay, at 2.1, there is no determination of urgent business today. 3.1, has anybody got any declarations of interest that they wish to make? No, okay, thank you. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. At 4.1, we have the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Development Management Committee of the 19th of March 2020 for approval. I'll take it page by page. Page 9, page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Can I get agreement for approval?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to 4. Councillor Copeland, are you indicating you want to speak? I know you've popped up.
No, just saying approved.
Okay. Could you put your camera off at the moment? It's just that if you come up on camera, it's to indicate you. Thank you. It's not that I don't want to look at you, Councillor Copeland. 4.2 is the minute of the meeting of the predetermination hearing of the 13th of January 2020 for approval. Again, I'll take it page by page. If anybody wants to indicate that they have anything to say, again, if you drop it into the chat. Councillor Stewart, obviously, if you make a verbal noise. So we have page 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Final minute at 4.3 is a minute of the predetermination hearing of the 15th of January 2020. Again, I'll take it page by page. Page 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, and 56. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you all very much. Committee planner at 5.1, therefore noting. Can we just note that, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the general business today, where we have recommendations of approval. The first item is 6.1, which is a planning permission in principle for the erection of a residential-led mixed-use development of approximately 550 homes, community and sports facilities, retail classes 1, 2, 3, and sui generis, with associated landscaping, open space and infrastructure at Clover Hill, Aberdeen, application 191171. I'll now hand over to Gavin Evans, who will take us through this. As I say, after Gavin has come on, given us this presentation, I'll ask for questions. Thank you, Gavin.
Convener, just be a second while I get the PowerPoint up and shared with everyone.
That's okay. Thank you, Gavin.
Item 6.1 relates to an application for planning permission in principle for a residential-led mixed-use major development, which incorporates approximately 550 homes, along with retail, community uses, and all-weather sports pitch, associated public open space and infrastructure works on a site at Clover Hill, which is located to the west of the section of the main A92 road between the Merker and ACC roundabout junctions. The following slides show the extent of the site and its surrounding context, so I'll just flick through those as I'm speaking. The 22.5 hectare site is comprised of open agricultural fields with small clusters of existing trees, largely confined to the edges of the site. Just flicking through here, this gives you an indication of the main sort of points of interest, the two roundabouts, the A92 running into the western boundary of the site, the Silver Burn, which joins the site around the midpoint and then progresses down to the south and on through the Silver Burn house site to the south. An existing residential property at Ironfield there, which is presently accessed via a track which runs off the A92 and from west to east through the central portion of the site. As I mentioned before, this is a position of existing trees throughout the site, generally confined to sort of field boundaries and the sort of peripheral edges of the site. In terms of surrounding topography, surrounding land uses, much of the land to the west of the A92 is identified in the current local development plan for business and industrial uses. So here we have the existing Aberdeen Energy Park, the former ACC site further south, golf courses between those allocations and the coast, retail provision at Bridge of Dawn Retail Park, and the industrial estates at Bridge of Dawn, Denmore and Merker industrial estates, which are on the western side of the A92. So in terms of in terms of the local development plan, this slide 14 shows the relevant opportunity sites which apply. That's on page 124 of the agenda if anyone's following separately. So as I say, much of the land to the west of the A92 is identified, to the east of the A92 is identified in the local development plan for business and industrial use, which includes the current application site outlined in red there, which forms part of the wider OP2 opportunity site. You'll see there that in orange outlined in blue, we also have OP1 at Merker to the north and OP3 at Findlay Farm, the latter of which provides an opportunity for the expansion of the existing Aberdeen Energy Park. On the western side of the A92 are the industrial estates that I mentioned before, along with the retail provision at Bridge of Don Retail Park. It is zoned within the catchments for Scotstoun Primary School and Bridge of Don Academy, both of which lie on the western side of the A92. This slide 15 shows the zoning in the current local development plan. So you'll see that sort of lighter pink wash is the business and industrial zoning where policy B1 applies. Immediately to the south of that's a slightly darker purpley hue, which is the specialist employment zoning, which is more geared towards sort of offices rather than industrial use. However, it does allow for industrial use in certain circumstances. And the orange directly to the north is the land release allocation. So that's for business and industrial use at the initial phase of the plan. So excuse me, this site is zoned for business and industrial use in the local development plan, and that doesn't provide for residential use in this location. On that basis, the proposal was considered to represent a significant departure from the current local development plan, and that necessitated a predetermination hearing, which was held in January of this year. A total of 128 representations were received, with 123 of those expressing support for the proposal. In particular, there was support expressed for the early phase delivery of affordable housing units and the potential for provision of local retail and sports facilities. On to slide 16. This shows how things have changed in terms of the proposed local development plan. So despite the conflict with the current development plan, officers note that there's currently a plentiful supply of employment land in the city, which was evidenced by the most recent employment land audit undertaken, such that residential development here would not undermine the strategic development plan's requirement for the council to maintain at least 60 hectares of available employment land at all times. In addition, the emerging policy context offered by the proposed local development plan offers support for residential use in this location, with the site having been rezoned for residential use from its present business and industrial zoning. The proposed local development plan, members will be aware, was approved in March by council and now represents the council's settled view. So on to slide 17. This slide and the ones that follow give an indicative layout along with an indication of building heights, types, street hierarchy and indicative phasing, along with details of the access junctions and the identified safe routes to schools. Excuse me, so that's page 127 of the agenda onwards. The presence of the A92 to the west of this and the allocation of neighbouring in both the current and proposed local development plan industrial use means that there are potential noise sources that require careful consideration. However, relevant noise assessments have provided comfort that those noise impacts can be satisfactorily mitigated, and full details of mitigation would be required based on the finalised layout as part of the approval of matters specified in conditions process. So there will be a further opportunity for the planning authority to have scrutiny and ensure that those are up to the task. Taking all of these factors into account, sorry, I flipped through. So this slide's just showing the sort of higher density or higher height buildings outlined in red there. These are generally focused around the site accesses. So at the central part, that's the main site access, which is a traffic light controlled junction. And the red block that you see further to the south is to the secondary access, which would operate on a left in, left out basis. Those just help to sort of signpost the main access points into the development. This next slide shows the building typologies, so it indicates that there's a good mix of terraced, semi-detached, detached properties, along with some flats and some bungalows. This is the street hierarchy throughout the development, and you'll see dashed there is a potential bus route, albeit roads officers have advised that it's not essential for bus routes to be diverted into the site, and new bus routes would be provided on the A92 adjacent to the main site access at that central point. This next slide's the indicative phasing plan, which shows that development would start at sort of midpoint, including traffic light controlled access junction, before continuing northwards, with the third phase being the sort of last 30 or so houses at the southern tip of the site. So, in summary, taking all these factors into account, officers consider that the site is no longer required as employment land, given the plentiful supply across the city, and a satisfactory residential environment can be provided in principle, with delivery of residential development on the site given significant support by the emerging policy context in the proposed plan. The site is suitably accessible for existing retail facilities and local schools, with necessary improvements in the form of new pedestrian crossings over the A92 and bus stops adjacent to the main site access. On balance, it's considered that the departure from the current development plan would be justified in this instance, and that appropriate conditions as listed in the report can secure full details of a finalised scheme along with the necessary infrastructure improvements and environmental controls. I do just have a quick correction, Convener. In the report under heads of terms, for things to be included in the section 75, it doesn't make reference to the roads contributions that are identified in the roads development management team's response, so we should just be aware that that should also capture those. That's just an oversight on my part. So the last couple of slides here are just sort of technical details. These are indicative at this point, and final details would still need to be agreed. But this is the main access junction coming into the central part of the site, which shows token pedestrian crossings allowing for pedestrians and cyclists to cross not only the main access road but also the A92. And then this next slide's the southern access that would operate on a left-in, left-out basis. And last of all, this slide's just indicating the identified safe routes to school. It's worth noting that Greenbrae Primary School, which is indicated by the number 1 on this slide, is closest as the crow flies, but is not currently zoned for the site. And there's no route where that dashed red line is shown at the moment. That would be part of the aspirational core path route, which the council would intend to deliver at some point in the future, but there's no committed funding or programme for that as yet. So that concludes my presentation, Councillor Bolton, so I'll just hand back to you at that point.
I think you're still muted, Councillor Bolton.
Councillor Bolton, you're on mute.
There, that's better. I bet lots of people would like to mute me. However, thank you very much, Gavin, for that presentation. It was extremely helpful and put together to make it as clear as possible for us. As always, the committee, I'm sure, will have a number of questions. Could I ask you to indicate in the chat if you have questions? And Councillor Stewart, obviously, if you could indicate verbally if you have.
Lindsay, I will have a couple of questions, please, for the convener.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat from anyone else. Has anybody else got questions? No? Councillor Stewart, would you like to put forward your questions, please?
Yes, thank you, convener. It was more, my focus was more just about on the safe routes to school and the capacity for, I suppose, children that will evolve from this development, and how many that would be, and will we be able to cope with all of the added children that would come from that?
Kevin?
Yes, thank you, convener. As I mentioned before, the site is zoned within the catchments for Scotstoun Primary School and Bridge of Don Academy. Scotstoun Primary School, when factoring in the most recent school roll forecasts, indicates that the school would be operating above capacity. Therefore, developer contributions have been identified in order to offset the impact. That contribution for Scotstoun Primary would be £683,325, based on the maximum overcapacity level of 75 pupils. So that's to account for those additional 75 notional pupils. In terms of secondary education, the site's zoned within the catchment for Bridge And when that's factored in, or when the development is factored into the school roll forecasts, the school would still be operating within capacity, therefore wouldn't require any mitigation or developer obligations.
I can bring in Andrew Jones, who is on the call. Would that be helpful, Councillor Stewart?
If possible, because thank you, convener. Just for further clarity, I heard about the 600,000 plus that would be part of the developer contribution, but I assume by that to compensate for the extra 75 children, are we talking that would be some form of extra rooms built if the school would be over capacity? Is that what it's for? Or, you know, how, if that could be explained a little bit further. Yes, please. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, convener. Just to confirm, as Gavin has outlined, the capacity, there is some spare capacity at Scotston School, but this development is likely to take the school over capacity by approximately 75 pupils. So yes, the contribution that we're seeking there would be to create that additional capacity by extending the school and creating additional classrooms.
Are you satisfied, Councillor Stewart?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Could I just ask before to just pop in here, because there's a slightly related question to the school capacity, and that's that there was mention of obviously a different school that it's closer to it. Is there any considerations given that if the aspirational core path was delivered, what's the capacity like at that primary school?
Yes, convenient. The primary school you're referring to there is Greenbrae Primary School. That is actually very close to capacity at the moment and is expected to exceed capacity already. We extended that school just a couple of years ago. There's no scope for further extending that school, so we wouldn't be looking at that as an opportunity really for this site.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stewart had an additional, which was the safe routes to school question. Would you like to repeat it, Councillor Stewart? I think I've lost Councillor Stewart. I think the essence of our question was about the safe routes to school and just about reassurance. I do know there's a condition being attached to the proposed approval of the application, which they would come back with a bit more detail. Mr. Jones, would you like just to elaborate maybe on the safe routes to school?
I'm not sure if I can help too much with that, convener. I think that would be more for Rose colleagues. I don't have a huge amount to do with that.
Okay, Scott, I believe that you perhaps could maybe give us a bit of information, Scott Lynch.
Yes, I could.
Thank you.
So at current, the site is to have footways along the frontage, and obviously there'll be a crossing at the main site access, which will be linked to the traffic lights. So that would obviously get people across the road there. And I think at the predetermination hearing, there was queries about what about people who live in the southern part of the site, and would they not more naturally want to walk along the east of the road instead of going north to then head south? And to answer that, I would say there is aspirations for the roundabout at the ACC as part of other schemes, not Clover Hill, to be transitioned into more of a signalised junction, which would have crossing facilities as well. So part of our developer contribution from this site would go towards that if that were to go ahead. So that's something I've been speaking to the design team about. So at current, that is our aspiration, but that is contingent on other schemes coming forward to help fund that. And obviously it would be those other schemes coming forward as well that would necessitate that change.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Councillor Copeland, I noticed that you've come in. Mr. Jones, if you'd like to come back onto the call. Councillor Copeland, do you want to ask your question? Councillor Copeland?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shall I ask your question?
Right. Is that better?
Yes, hear you.
I'm concerned that it's 600,000 plus developer contributions for the school, but it's a 3-phase development. And I wondered how they're going to work the developer contribution given the amount of work that's needed for the school in each phase. Are they how are we going to work this? Because obviously you can't stop and start work on a school. If you're going to have to do, you're going to have to cater for the whole site. So how are we going to get this? Is it council paying for it first and get the money at the end, or developer contributing up front and building these houses?
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, convener. I think the detail of that would be worked out through the legal agreement on the developer contribution. So I'm not sure I can comment in too much detail on that at the moment. However, from previous experience with other projects, there has tended to be a delay in the developer contributions being paid because they tend to be related to the number of houses built, and where we need to provide the capacity before that happens, we tend to look to the capital programme for that initially until the developer contributions have been paid.
Gavin, is there anything you can add to that?
Yes, I think what Mr. Jones has said is really sort of summarises it. It is a large-scale development and it is across 3 phases, as Councillor Copeland says. The way that Section 75 agreements are normally framed is that the contribution would be worked out on a per unit basis, and then payments would be made quarterly in arrears based on the number of completions within that quarter. So yes, there is potential for there to be a sort of lag between the demand coming on stream and the delivery of the additional capacity, but as Mr. Jones says, then the capital programme can be looked to bridge that gap in the short term.
Thank you very much. Are you comfortable with the answer, Councillor Copeland?
Not entirely, because of the amount of work that's going to have to be done in the school. I mean, it's a big expansion for 75 pupils, but if that's how it's going to work, that's how it's going to work. The other question I had is, how far away is Scotstoun School from the north of this site? Because to my mind, it's a long way. And would there be, is it far enough for kids to be bused to the school? Because it's a long way for a 5-year-old to walk.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, convener. I can confirm that Scotstoun School is within 2 miles walking distance of the development site, and 2 miles is the cut-off point for providing transport. So I wouldn't see a necessity for us to provide transport costs for children for this site.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask, has any other members got questions? I'm not seeing any indications. Oh, Councillor Gregg, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, page 93 refers to an acoustic barrier to mitigate noise levels at the periphery. From my reading, it doesn't sound as if this acoustic barrier would be able to adequately guarantee its success in minimising noise. So could we have a little bit more information on how it operates and on its effectiveness? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Gavin, would you want to start this, and perhaps we need then to hand environmental health?
Yeah, sure. So because this is a permission in principle, what we have before us is an indicative layout. So there are certain sort of assumptions and hypotheticals being factored in. But as Councillor Gregg says, there is a need for an acoustic barrier along the western boundary of this site towards in order to mitigate the road traffic noise that's coming from that, even with the reduction in speed to 40-mile-an-hour limit. The noise impact assessment that's been submitted indicates that the noise could be brought down to a sort of tolerable level as required by the British standard. However, there would also be a need for an acoustic barrier in some form. Now that might be a sort of landscaped earth bund, or an acoustic fence, or a combination of landscape planting and tree planting on top of that bund might further mitigate the noise impact. So we can't be, this is a sort of desk-based assessment at the moment by acoustic professionals, and that's given us some comfort that this can be achieved. But ultimately, we'll need to see the finalised layout and the finalised specification for noise mitigation in order to be absolutely certain that it does the job. But we do have comfort. Our colleagues in environmental health are satisfied on that point, and perhaps my colleague Mr. Glover wants to say a few words on that point.
Mr. Glover?
Hello, convener. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that covers the question. Gavin's answered the question there. Nothing too much more to add. My understanding is that there are a number of properties. I think it's in the region of something like 20 to 30 properties that would be at higher risk of higher noise levels, but without the sort of finer details yet, and the final decision on layout and boundary barrier heights. It's difficult to give it any more specifics on that.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Councillor Gregg, would you like to ask any further questions on that, or are you satisfied?
A further question, please, on that subject. The report mentions that the housing would require, I think it mentioned triple glazing or further adaptations to minimise the noise impact. Is that something that can be covered by the condition? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that the housing is adequately protected? Thanks.
I can take that one, convener. Yes, essentially, when we have the detail of the finalised proposal and we have the detail of the mitigation measures being put forward, there would be the option to put further conditions on subsequent applications in order to ensure their delivery and in order to ensure their effectiveness. So things like triple glazing or acoustic ventilators for windows to allow ventilation in but without exposing occupants to noise. Those are all possibilities, but ultimately will be bottomed out through the matters specified in conditions applications and could then be secured by further conditions placed on those approvals. So hope that clarifies.
Councillor Gregg?
Thank you, that's very helpful. I've got questions on other subjects. Will I ask them now or later?
Yeah, if you could just wait one question. I noticed Councillor Copeland said he wants to come back in. Is it on this point, Councillor Copeland? I can't hear you, Councillor Copeland. Keep trying.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Is it on the same point?
It's okay. I've got the answer to the question I was going to ask. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Certainly, carry on, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. A quick question about the hydrogen heating, the residential hydrogen heating project. The report mentions that it would be a challenge to leverage in these low carbon initiatives. I assume that's because these would be largely private sector initiatives. Is it possible to have a little bit more information on the risks or any other details? Because I think that this would be a welcome and quite an exciting addition to the heating system. Thanks.
Mr. Evans, could you pick up on that?
Yes. I think that comment was perhaps made by Invest Aberdeen, commenting on the difficulty in leveraging anything over and above this for these things. We don't have a statutory requirement or a policy basis for obliging people to use this sort of technology. So I think the excitement there was about a new technology being used and piloted in a residential context, which I'm led to believe is somewhat unique in Scotland. So I couldn't comment too much on the risks, but because it is being privately funded, then that takes the risk away from the local authority.
Councillor Gregg?
Yes, thanks for that. I think that it's useful to get that idea in the context of the planning application, that there is that aspiration to maximise the use of sustainable low carbon proposals. So that's good. Thank you for that. And then I have just a further question. I'm going back to safe routes to schools. The proposal is to reduce the speed limit on the A92 from 70 down to 40, and then during school times down to 20. So is that a is it realistic to expect that the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit will be observed? Any feedback on that?
I don't know, Gavin, do you want to take it, or Scotland perhaps? Scott?
Yeah.
I'd probably ask Scott to come in on that one if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Scott?
Sure. In advance of this meeting, I consulted the traffic management team just for their thoughts on that exact issue. They were saying, because I consulted them when we came up with the idea of bringing it down to 40 instead of, for example, 30. And the traffic management team had said that they based that on Wellington Road, which is also 40 and has a part-time 20. And they've said that they've seen that work with great success, even with Lochside Academy being put in. So that's why we've done that. So yes, I do imagine that would be sufficient.
Okay, thank you for that. Although noting that Wellington Road relates to Lochside Academy, which is secondary, and the Clover Hill site would be primary and secondary. So I think that there may be some further, complications to it. But thank you for that. That's helpful. And that's all my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gregg. Has any other councillors got any questions? I'm just checking the chat at the moment. My last request for a question was Councillor Gregg. I've got a couple, if not. Okay, if we could go back to, I think it's yourself, Scott, so don't disappear. It's with regard to the fact that we're suggesting it just come down to 40 rather than 30. Now, we've seen moves across the city, I know locally at the A93, etc., where we have taken it down to 30. And there does seem to be a bit of a 30, 40, 70 kind of mix along that road. Is there any way that this could actually be further reduced to a 30-mile, or is there a reason why we wouldn't want to do that?
Thank you, Convener. Again, in consultation with the traffic management team, they had said they initially certainly wouldn't support a 30, and he gave his reasons as following. So the first he said was, when considering a speed reduction, you generally do it in steps of no more than 20. So he said if we did initially go straight down to 30, a step down feature would be required, which would be something sort of more than just changing the speed, some sort of feature to sort of encourage that, whereas going down to 40 would likely see more success. He'd also said, which I'd previously said, that Wellington Road was a good basis for this. Oh, somebody's saying they can't really hear me.
Yeah, Scott, yeah, could you turn up your volume?
Is that better?
Councillor Gregg, does that help?
Yes, I had to turn up my own volume to hear Scott Lynch, but that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, carry on, Scott.
Apologies. And yeah, the other thing traffic management said was just by bringing it to 40, that would align with the adjacent stretch, which is also 40, before it then comes down to 30 further in towards the city. So initially, I don't think there's a specific reason it couldn't go to 30, but traffic management's preference for the aforementioned reasons would be that, at least initially anyway, it goes to a 40, which, as I say, we've seen success with at Wellington Road.
If I could just kind of expand on this particular point, and I think that maybe if Mr. Glover would want to join in this conversation, because if I can relate it back to obviously the impact of noise on the development from the road, that I would have thought that if we could have further brought it down to 30 miles an hour, again, it would have reduced the noise. And my reason for asking around this is that obviously what we want Clover Hill, if it's approved, to feel part of the wider Bridge of Dawn. My concern with putting, sort of large bunds or acoustic barriers or fences up is that it gives the impression that it's not part of the Bridge of Dawn. So I'm looking for a solution that would perhaps reduce the noise further, which could mean that we could maybe have a slightly less heavy intervention in terms of segregation that could be managed. Mr. Glover, do you want to comment on, if there was a further reduction in speed, if you believe that that would be a reduction in noise?
Aye, thank you, Convener. Yeah, generally, the slower the vehicles are going, the less noise comes from them. The faster vehicles go, you get more tyre noise, and it's tyre noise that is what we hear. So to what extent dropping from 40 to 30 would have is not known at the minute. The noise impact assessment submitted only looked at 70 and 40. If further information was required on that, I think we'd have to go back to the applicant to request their consultant to do a further study to see what that, how much of an impact that would have by reducing that speed limit.
Okay. Mr. Evans, could you maybe come in, because obviously part of the thing is a design in terms of making sure that the Clover Hill feels part of the wider Bridge of Dawn community and not creating, if you like, barriers between them. Could you maybe comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're quite right that, I mean, ideally the development would have more of an interaction and a face to the road, and that's something that is desirable. However, the noise impact assessment that Mr. Glover referred to there, the reduction in speed limit from 70 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour assumed a reduction of each 10 kilometers an hour in speed would equate to 1 to 2 decibels in saving. So assuming that that same logic can be applied to the difference between 40 and 30, and we're not certain that it can, that would need to be considered in detail by an acoustic consultant. But even if that sort of assumption could be continued, there would only be a saving of somewhere between, I think it was 1.6 and 3 decibels, which wouldn't negate the need for an acoustic barrier. So the likelihood is that we would still require that bund or that acoustic fencing or something along the A92 boundary. So it doesn't seem like there would be an obvious fix there in terms of reducing the speed limit and doing away with that. But as Mr. Glover says, you know, we're sort of making some assumptions there based on the previous work done rather than putting it back to the applicant at this point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that there's the road safety as well that falls into all of this. So, you know, I mean, I think if we could get to 30 mile an hour, whether it's immediately or not, I think it certainly would be desirable for a number of reasons. Okay, is there anybody got any further questions? I've got one more, you'll be glad to know that it's the final one. With regard to the surrounding land, I know we've got an aspirational footpath through on one side, but is there opportunities to make sure that accessibility could be permeated through the site into existing areas? Because even if it was for work or anything, it's quite important that we don't, again, it's back to not making it feeling like an isolated gated community, to ensure that we could have paths, even if it's cycle and walking paths through, that the land would be available. Mr. Evans?
Yes, the layout does provide for this. I'm afraid I didn't mention it in my presentation, but the indicative layout shown does show certain key points to the north and to the east, which allow for potential future connections through between residential development here and industrial and employment land immediately adjacent. So what that should do is avoid the need for circuitous journeys by car, where, you know, a sustainable travel would be possible and preferable. So yeah, provision is made in the layout for that, and we'd hope to carry that through to the finalised layout as well.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Gavin. Mr. Evans, can I just, again, before we go on to motions or amendments, could I just double check that everybody's asked the questions that they wanted to? I'm just checking the meeting chat.
And I'll just shout yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right, obviously we're now moving on to the recommendation, which is approved conditionally with legal agreement. There's 29 conditions laid out on pages 102 to 109 of the report. I will be moving the officer's recommendation. Can I ask, is anybody otherwise minded? If you could indicate in the meeting chat if you are. No. So the recommend, can I take that as a unanimous decision?
Yes.
Okay, I think probably because
Yes.
we're on on IT, perhaps again, just for completeness, I'll maybe just ask Ms McBain just to do a roll call so that we have got everyone giving their verbal agreement. So Ms McBain, can we go to the count, please?
Thank you, convener. So rather than a vote, I'll just make sure that everybody's in agreement with yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Bolton, you're happy to approve the recommendations?
Yes.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Allen?
Agreed.
Councillor Cook?
Yes, agreed.
Councillor Copeland?
Yes.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Agreed.
Councillor Gregg?
Agreed.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Agreed.
And Councillor Malik?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So the application is approved in line with the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're moving swiftly on to item 6.2, which is Aberdeen Market, and we have Matthew Easton who will take us through this report. Matthew, Mr. Easton, if you could ask you to step forward.
Thank you, convener. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just get there. Can you see the presentation as well? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just run through a summarization of the application, then I'll go through the slides which are part of the agenda pack. This application is to redevelop the site of the Aberdeen Market and construct a mixed-use officer-led development. The proposal would see the demolition of the Aberdeen Market building and its replacement with a new building of up to 11 stories in height, which would accommodate office space in its upper floors and 3 separate commercial units at ground floor. These units have the potential to be occupied by a range of uses, namely retail, food and drink, financial, professional and other services, assembly and leisure, or public house use. A car park within the lower levels of the building would accommodate 126 parking spaces. Just move the slides there. So that's the application site. In considering the application, officers have found the proposal would generally meet the aspirations sought by the city centre master plan and would create an enhanced node within the city centre, which could be the focus of activity during daytime and evening. The mix of uses and potential of between 800 and 1,000 people working within the building would contribute to the vibrancy, viability of the city centre. In terms of scale and design, it is acknowledged that the height and size of the building would represent a significant intervention in a sensitive part of the Union Street Conservation Area. Whilst in long distance views across the city, the building would sit comfortably on the skyline, and in medium and short distance views, the building would generally maintain the character of the area. It is, however, acknowledged that from the green and streets to the south within the merchant quarter, there would be a localised harm to the conservation area due to the height and size of the building, compared to the relatively modest scale of the surrounding townscape. However, the harm is considered to be outweighed by the wider benefits which the development would offer. These include removing the existing building, which at the moment offers little by way of interaction with its surroundings, provision of active commercial uses at street level, increased and enhanced areas of public realm, and the economic uplift from the increased number of workers and visitors in the area. In terms of car parking, on balance, the proposed 126 spaces would be acceptable, taking into account the parking standards in the adopted local plan, and on the basis that it would represent a continued trend in reducing the number of parking spaces provided within the city centre developments. Traffic analysis shows that with the addition of traffic associated with the development, surrounding junctions would still operate within capacity and no mitigation measures would be required. Concern has of course been raised about the loss of the existing market, and whilst the wider economic impact of a development can be taken into account, be that positive or negative, the particular impact on specific businesses shouldn't be a consideration. Any decision to close the market and redevelop the site would be a commercial decision for the applicant and operator of the market to agree upon, with it being inevitable there will be third parties that will be affected by that decision, again, either negatively or positively. It's officers' opinion that the economic benefits of the development would outweigh the impact of the loss of the market building. We should also highlight that due regard has been had to qualities and groups with protected characteristics, which in this case relates to the LGBT support hub within the market. The conclusion was that the impact of having to relocate the hub would be minimal and not sufficient to warrant refusal of the application. Otherwise, subject to several planning conditions and a legal agreement, the building would meet relevant technical and design criteria, with the recommendation therefore being one of approval. Now I'll just take you through the slides that you can hopefully see on the screen, yes?
Yes, thank you.
So I've got a couple of images of the existing building that we should all be familiar with. That's from Market Street. Moving round to Haddon Street, taxi rank there, heading down towards the green. And then
That's it, there you are. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and then that is the situation at the green at the moment. That's the existing floor plate of the building, as you can see.
I think Matthew or Mr. Easton, I think your things are slightly behind for your speaking.
Okay, so. I'll go a bit slower. Are you seeing the floor plan at the moment?
Yes, we're now onto the ground floor plan. Yes.
Okay, good. Just try and get both up. Okay, so you can see it extends right away from Market Street all the way through to the green. You've got the curved end at the green. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So moving on to the proposal itself, as you can see, this is the Market Street elevation. We have the existing 6 Market Streets here, the retail unit, which should be retained. Moving on to the building, which would be up against Market Street, 4 stories going up to 5, then set back with public plaza here, entrance to the building, which would raise to, again, 5, 6 stories. Haddon Street on the left-hand side here. Moving around onto Haddon Street itself, again, got Market Street, entrance plaza. As you go down to the green, the building rises in height. We've got the 2 car park entrances and exits here, providing access onto Haddon Street, and commercial uses onto the green and the end of Haddon Street on the left-hand side. Moving on to the green itself, again, commercial uses at ground floor, office above. This represents the tallest part of the building at 11 stories here, with the wing on the left-hand side slightly lower. Then finally, on the east green elevation, you can see the building again going up towards the green as it increases in height. There's not much of this elevation. This would be mainly for servicing of the building, as the lane is used for at the moment. And then it's a cross section that just shows the difference in levels. So there is a difference in levels between the green and Market Street, which allows for parking to be accommodated in the lower ground floors of the building. Commercial again onto the green area. I'll just run through the floor plans. So again, commercial here onto the green. As you can see, the original layout of the building, the existing building, goes up to the curve here, whereas this building is set back, offering a new area of public realm. Then the car parking on the right-hand side, more car parking taking advantage of the change in levels. Then we're up to Market Street with the entrance plaza here, a commercial unit here onto the space and onto Market Street, building reception, then the space in blue, which at the green end, second floor. As you've got the building, it's each floor is relatively similar on levels 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Then as we've got 7 and 8, the floor plates get smaller as the building gets higher. Then up to 9, 10, and finally 11, which is known as the lantern at the top of the building. We've got some visuals here just to show how the building would sit in the streetscape and landscape. This is from West Tullis Road, so you can see it there in distance. There's various buildings which puncture the skyline, and that's it sitting there. I've sort of blown it up a bit so it's a bit easier to see. This is from outside Union Square. So you can see the building sits there behind the existing buildings in the Merchant Quarter, acting as a landmark as people come into the city from the railway station. This is looking from the bottom of Guild Street up towards Union Street. Again, the building sits out here, matching in with the rising roof line as the street goes up towards Union Street. This is an image from Union Street at Union Bridge. So you can see the new building sits just in behind Primark in terms of how it looks. It's actually further down the street, but it sits in there quite comfortably with the other buildings on Union Street. This is further up Union Street near the junction with Crown Street. Again, you can see the building just peeking out from behind the building, the Travel Lodge there at the end of Bridge Street. So again, we feel it sits quite comfortably in the streetscape. This is from St Nicholas Street looking south towards Market Street. The building would be seen from Union Street, but we're quite happy that it would sit comfortably again and to be able to distinguish between the new and the old. This is a bit closer, so this is looking at the crossing between St Nicholas Street outside Marks and Spencer's and the junction with Market Street and Union Street. You can see the existing 6 Market Street there, which will be retained before the new building appears there, with the public plaza just around the corner as it leads round into Haddon Street. These are computer generated images here, again showing a similar situation. Then some close-ups of the entrance plaza. So you've got Market Street on the right-hand side here, entrance to the building, commercial use, this unit here, and then steps going down into Haddon Street, round to the green. We've got green walls here, which would help integrate the building into the area and provide some greenery. So a similar view there, showing how it sits in the street. And then round to the green, as you can see, that's the additional public realm which should be offered with commercial uses at ground floor level spilling out. And then finally we've got one image of the full building visualised from the green, and that's representing the tallest part of the building there. That's the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Easton. That's been very helpful, and I think the photographs, even if they're photo montages, are always very helpful, and it's good to be able to see the building from the different locations around the city and out with. Members, could again I ask you to indicate in the chat now if you have questions for Mr. Easton?
Yeah, I will, Lindsay, or convener.
Yeah, okay, Councillor. Councillor Cook, I think you probably just beat Councillor Stewart, so if I could bring you in first, and then I'll get to the next lot.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, first a couple of questions, and the first one is on the impact on the existing market traders, which there've been a number of representations on. I was toying with the idea, maybe could we put in a condition that said make provision for the existing traders, but having looked at the 2013 circular that's referenced on page 149, that's not really going to fly, is it? It's not. We couldn't do that, could we?
Mr. Easton.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right there. Once, as a planning authority, we don't really want to get into personalising planning consents. There's a risk there that we get accused of interfering in market forces, really. I mean, there would be space within the building, commercial units, which they potentially could occupy. Whether that happens or not, that's really not for us to say. There is space within the city centre, other units, which again, potentially some of them could occupy. But again, it's not really for us to interfere in that market. It's more about the uses that we are interested in, which in this case, we're happy there's a range of uses which would be of benefit to the city centre.
And am I right in thinking that the developer has indicated that they might make some space available to existing tenants in the old BHS store?
Yes, actually, yes, I should have mentioned that. That's something that we've been advised of just last week, was that the applicant, who also owns the former BHS store, which forms part of the market building, the part that would be left on Union Street, they currently have interest in from an operator of a trampoline centre they've got lined up. The consent that we recently granted about a month ago allows for that, but also allows for retail use within it. So the building operator, the applicant for this application, has indicated that they would be offering some of that space to people who are in the market at the moment.
Thanks, that's helpful. I've got one other question on a completely different issue. Shall I?
Yes, please carry on, Councillor.
Yeah, the other one is on the electric vehicle charging points, where there are, I think it's 126 parking spaces, and the suggestion is to have 5 of those for EV charging points, which I think is consistent with our current supplementary guidance on transport. My concern on it is that that guidance has been with us for a few years. This thing might not go ahead for another 5 years. And I'm thinking that actually we maybe need more than that. So I'm wondering if we put a condition to require more, or be only passive provision or just ducting to allow EV charging points to be installed in the future without having to dig the whole car park up. Could we put a condition on that? And what would be an appropriate number? Would it be 10%, 20%, or what?
Mr. Easton?
Yes, I mean, given that we're proposing, in a normal consent would last 3 years, we're proposing 5 years to grant 5 years. So that is longer than normal. So I think it would be, I don't think it would be unreasonable to ask for a bit more than normal, as you suggest. At the moment, yes, it's 5 spaces at 126. I'm not sure. I'd maybe defer to my roads colleagues in terms of what they think would be a reasonable amount. But I certainly think our guidance at the moment does encourage passive provision. So yeah, you don't have to dig up the whole place again to provide that capacity.
Mr. Lynch, do you have an opinion?
Yes, thank you, convener. So currently our standards say, if I recall correctly, that it should have at least 2 passive and 2 active. And if I recall, I think they're proposing 5 active. So that's obviously more than our current requirements. As to what would form a competent condition in terms of asking for over and above what our standards stipulate, Mr. Easton would have to say, but I did consult sort of the council electric charging guru, who said that if we did want to future-proof the site, the 2 things we should request in a condition is just that they have adequate power provision for future charging stations, and also that they have the ducting in place. So in terms of what number you'd look for there to be, I would just be guessing as much as you as to what you think is appropriate. But those are the 2 things they should have in a condition if you want to future-proof the site.
Okay, Councillor Cook, would that satisfy your condition of that sort?
Yes, absolutely. It's the future-proofing thing. I suspect the developer would regard it in their own interest anyway, but I'd be happy with that sort of condition.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Have you any more questions?
No, that's me done. I haven't even got one on flooding.
Well, you know, that's why I thought was coming there. Councillor Stewart, can I take you in now?
Thank you, convener. I just want to say, I think one of my first questions was to be about the small businesses, because there have been a number of representations. I think it's important that that point has been made clear, that really isn't, as I think Matthew put it, to get involved in that detail. Because I think when this is televised, or however it's going to go out, it's important that the public know that point. I also wanted to inquire about the actual height of the building, because again, that's a concern that has been put to me, and ask Matthew, where would the biggest impact of seeing the height of the building be from? So just so that I'm clear, so there's that point. Also, another concern that's been put to me is that we already have a lot of office space in the city. Should we really be providing more office space? And I'm wondering if that's a similar answer as in terms of the small businesses. On the Photoshop pictures that's showing the building, how it will look looking onto the green, just to confirm, they will be using sympathetic cobble slabs that they would blend in with what's already there in respect of the frontages looking onto the green from the building, if that will make sense.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Easton, could I ask you to respond to those questions?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the height of the building, yes, the highest part is onto the green, the main tower with the structural frame at the top there, which hopefully you can see in the presentation still. So the green would be the area where the impact is highest, mainly because of the height of the building and the size of it compared to what's relatively modest buildings around it. They're typically four or 5 stories in height in the green. So that is where the main discussion has been on how the building interacts with its surroundings in terms of having an adverse impact. Beyond that, we're relatively comfortable that the building sits okay, especially from the north, from Union Street. We're happy that, although it will be seen, it sits in the background. It's not necessarily competing with Union Street. From the south, we saw the image from the railway station, which I'll just run to now. We're happy again that it sits there quite comfortably in the streetscape. And we saw further afield, we're again comfortable that it doesn't cause any harm visually in terms of long distance views. I mean, there's always going to be places that you don't expect to see buildings from a distance, but given that there is quite a distance there, we don't feel that that harm would warrant refusal. I'll move on to the office space. So yeah, I mean, it's been publicised that there's a lot of, or allegedly a lot of empty office space around the city. That, I mean, the purpose of the planning system is to create the conditions for investment by allocating land, allocating space, granting consent for appropriate development. It's really for the applicants, developers to decide whether it's in their actual interests to proceed with these developments, and it's at their risk if the building doesn't end up being filled. What the applicant has told us is that they're quite confident that there will be a demand for this space, not maybe now, but in a few years. You've got the existing Class A office developments within the city centre, which are steadily filling up with not only new occupants, but occupants from around the city, from the West End, from Dice, where now occupants are moving into the city centre. So the word from the applicant is that they're happy that within a few years' time, the demand will be there, and they're wanting to meet that demand. That was post-corona. How that changes things, I don't think anyone knows at the moment, so we probably just have to leave that at that, to be honest. In terms of materials on the public realm, yes, certainly the proposal is that materials would match in with the green. Obviously, there was a THI, the Townscape Heritage Initiative, a few years ago, which vastly improved the public realm within the green. We'd want what's proposed here to complement that. So our master planning, design and conservation team have offered to collaborate with the applicant in terms of how that should be designed, what materials, what colours should be used. So so there is a condition that will deal with that. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Okay, just so you know that I have picked up on you, I've got Councillor Copeland next, followed by Councillor Gregg, then Councillor Hendrickson. So, Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. The questions about the car park entrances. I see we're saying in the report that the East Green entrance will be done away with, and the only entrances will be on Haddon Street. Have we given any thought to temporary traffic controls on Market Street, Haddon Street at peak times? I know the report says it's not required, but if you're not going to have 120 cars coming out of there and going into there at peak times, I would think that that's going to put an undue strain on Market Street. And also the fact that they're going to have possibly a low emissions zone about that area. Have they taken that into consideration? That's it.
Okay, now I don't know, Mr. Easton, if you want to take it or if Mr. Lynch would like to take the question, I'll let you decide.
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, so initially when the application was submitted, there was to be a car park entrance or exit on Haddon Street and another on East Green, around the back of the building. So we raised concern with that because that would entail putting more traffic into the green, which is already a semi-pedestrianised space. So we really didn't want that to happen. So with agreement of the applicant, the application was amended to have the entrance and exit both on Haddon Street to try and keep the traffic out of the green area as much as possible. Traffic analysis has been carried out, and whilst there's 126 spaces, they will not all empty or fill at the same time. So that traffic's spread out throughout the day, although there are obviously peak times in the morning and evening. I can maybe pass on to Scott and Mr. Lynch to maybe explain that in more detail.
Yes, thank you. So as part of that applicant submission, they've obviously looked at TRIX, which is the Trip Rate Information Computer System, where for a type of development of a given size, it specifies how many vehicles you can reasonably expect to see in the AM and PM peaks. And on top of that, they've also done their junction analysis. And that's all we can reasonably get anybody to do for a speculative application in advance. And what that had shown is that there shouldn't be an issue there. So I'm not sure if I can answer that in any more detail than that.
Councillor Copeland?
Yes, thanks for that. Can I ask a second one about
Definitely.
the provision for service vehicles for the building? Currently, they use the East Green entrance. Where are they going to go with this new plan?
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, the proposal was still that East Green would be the servicing area. There's that's where the waste store is, so that's where the waste will be collected, and the rest of the building will be serviced from as well.
So that, can I come back in? So there would be an access to the building off the East Green as well. That's for service in the building. Yes.
There'll be no vehicle access. The refuse vehicle would park on the street. There's a door to the waste store where the bins will be taken out of, but there's no vehicle access. There'll be no reason for vehicles to go around the back to enter the car park because they won't be able to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. Next, I've got Councillor Gregg.
Thanks. I have 3 questions. The first one is about parking. I couldn't quite follow the reasoning in the report about the parking, about following the parking policy. The requirement is 1 space per 80 square meters, which would be 207. But then there's a concession that would be which would permit 1 per 130 square meters, and then that was reduced to which would make 128, and then that's reduced to 126. So it would be useful to have a little bit of explanation around how the parking calculation has been made, if that's possible.
I could answer that one, Mr.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Yep.
So in terms of parking, you can imagine it in the city centre as a scale where on the left you've got the lower end.
Lindsay, I can't really hear Scott.
Can you turn up a little bit more, Scott?
Yeah, Paul, is that any better?
Not really.
It might. Is it my Wi-Fi or is it the volume? Because I'm almost shouting now.
Okay, I don't mind if you shout.
I think he is shouting.
I will.
You start off quite low, and then your volume seems to rise as you speak.
I'm not sure if it's the Wi-Fi because where I've got set up is quite far from the router. But I'll plough on. Let me know if you can't hear me.
If you can try and maybe just speak directly to the microphone, that sometimes helps.
I've even got a headset on and the mic's right in front of my mouth. Okay, so if you imagine that the parking requirement or allowance as a scale, where on the left you've got the minimum, and given it's city centre, we could theoretically allow or encourage little to no parking. And on the other end of the scale is the maximum provision, which is set out in our SG, which would be the 207 spaces. So again, theoretically, anywhere between both ends of that scale would be acceptable. And my opinion, which I expressed in my response, which is available online, was that the 126 spaces is still relatively high for a city centre site, but given that is within the allowable bounds, I thought that was acceptable. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. I was just trying to work out how 800 to 1,000 employees would be sufficiently, how their parking needs would be met sufficiently by this parking provision. But yeah, you've clarified how the policy operates. Thank you. And I have two other questions, if I may.
Please,
one is on policy D3 on microclimate. On page 158 mentions that there would be mitigating features added to deal with the adverse impact of winds. These sounded like temporary features. So what's the long term? I mean, long term, can you guard against the concerns caused by powerful winds caused by the building? What's the long-term view? Because this the conditions would be enforceable, but for how long?
Okay, I can take that. Yeah, the mitigation measures are permanent measures. They're not intended to be temporary, and those measures are recommended in the report that was carried out, which were a canopy at the southwest side of the building to prevent downdrafts, and also landscaping in that area. So those both would be implemented through the landscaping condition and through the separate condition on microclimate, and we'd be expecting those measures to stay in place permanently to address that issue.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, in the long term, it would be a case of just enforcing the planning conditions at whatever time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'd expect those measures, like the canopy, to remain on the building until the building disappears itself.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question is about conservation. There seemed to be an unresolved point there on page 155. The feedback from conservation seemed to express some concerns about the impact on the heritage of the area. So I wondered if that could be explained. Have those concerns been resolved from the professional viewpoint of conservation?
Yeah, so I mean, as said in the report, it's acknowledged there is a harm to the conservation area due to the height and scale of the building at the green in terms of how it interacts with the area. What officers as a whole have concluded is that although that impact will exist, the benefit of the building is outweighed. So the economic benefit, the interaction with the street, which will now have the new public realm, the view is as a collective that outweighs the harm that would be to the conservation area.
I see. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. That's fine. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Hendrickson next.
Thank you, Convener. I'm not sure whether they'll be able to answer these questions. It's sort of related around the development. It's the entrance to Union Street, and I just wondered whether the British Home Stores entrance on Union Street, whether the same company would be thinking about developing that, as that appears to be very, very closely connected on that. And I was interested to hear about the possibility of the development of that area for the market traders, and I just wondered whether there's anything that could be added to the potential about that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll bring Mr. Easton in on that, but what I would have to say is we have to stick to the relevance of this planning that we're considering today. However, perhaps Mr. Easton can give you some sort of comfort around your question. Mr. Easton?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, Convener, you're correct. We do have to look at the application before us, but the applicant, obviously for the former BHS store on Union Street there, they have just obtained a consent to allow the trampoline centre to occupy it, and they have indicated they'll be offering some of that space to former market traders as well. So, I mean, that's positive that unit will be hopefully coming back into use in the not too distant future. There is I wasn't sure if Councillor Henriksen was meaning this one or not, but there is a small entrance further up Union Street, like a corridor. So that would be removed because the link between the building, which you can see on the screen here, the link between the building obviously will have to go because the market building will no longer be there. So they do own parts. It's quite complicated at that end of the street. They own the lower parts of this building, but not the upper parts. But certainly the indication has been that they do want to make use of those areas, and they do have consent for a cafe at the green side of that building. So certainly all the indications are that the applicant is keen to make best use of all the property they have in that area.
Okay, and I think it's fair to say as well that Councillor Hendrickson, the application that Mr. Easton referred to, having just received a consent, will be online for you to view if you would like to look at it. And I'm sure Mr. Easton will be happy to answer any questions after this meeting on that site. Okay, thanks. Anything else, Councillor Hendrickson?
Sorry, no.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, I was very disappointed with Councillor Kennedy because he didn't ask his flooding question, so he's left it to me. Can I just ask, on page 141 of the report, under the Aberdeen City Council structures, flooding and coastal and engineering, it makes reference to the proposed freeboard of 10 centimetres. However, on the following page, on 142 from SEPA, they also make reference to the freeboard, but it's quite considerably deeper that they're recommending. Could I maybe have a little bit of reassurance and understanding of where we are with that?
Yeah, I can add to that. So there was a flood assessment carried out which identified that there's potential, but a low potential risk from surface water flooding. So that's essentially water during a heavy storm flowing in the area. Most flows would go down Market Street, various other streets away from the building. So the building's not at that high a risk, but as best practice, SEPA have suggested a 500 to 600 millimetre freeboard, and that's just to take account of uncertainties in flood modelling, really. SEPA aren't actually the competent body in terms of this application. They just provide advice really on flooding matters where it's surface water related. So our flooding team, the council's flooding team, have looked into it in more detail, and essentially because of it's an existing building at the moment, obviously within an urban area, there's not really much scope to jack the building up to achieve that half a metre between the streets and the floor levels. So the next best option would be to have flood resilient doors, just in case there are any surface water incidents, which would take care of that. So there is a condition that we need details of that. Say the SEPA recommendations are just recommendations, and it's really just guidance for us to then go and investigate the situation a bit more, which we've done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Easton. Can I ask, is there any more questions for Mr. Easton or any other officers on this application?
Sorry, can I come in? I'm not sure what icon I'm supposed to hit to let you know, so I'm just shouting in. Is that okay?
That's fine, Councillor Allen.
Right.
Got a question? Okay,
thanks, convener. I just want to check out again this issue of the existing traders. How robust do they feel the offer is for the VHS?
I mean, there's no proposal to attach a legal agreement or condition or anything to force them to do that. We can't really force them to do that. It's not our role to do that. Our role is to determine the planning application. So whilst they've made that offer, I mean, we've seen it in writing. It's no stronger than that, though, in terms of what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Final call for questions. Anybody got anything? No. Okay. Obviously, thank you very much, Mr. Easton, for that presentation and for the other officers' contribution. You know, I clearly understand that we have had one or two representations which has raised concerns about the market, the loss of the market, and the impact on the existing traders. We've had a clear steer from officers that, you know, that is not the remit of this committee to determine where they should be. We've also had quite a lot of information about our big buildings policy through the report, and I think we've had a good question and answer session, which we've covered. The recommendation is obviously to approve conditionally and withhold consent until a legal agreement is secured to deliver developers' obligations towards the tour path, open spaces, and provision of car club vehicles. The conditions are set out on pages 165 to 172. There's 26 of them. There's also 2 informative notes which are set out on page 172. I'll be moving the officer's recommendation. Is there anybody otherwise minded?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg. Okay, well, first of all, could I ask, have I got a seconder?
Convener, I'm happy to second. It's Councillor Stewart here.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Can I ask, does Councillor Gregg have a seconder? I could, Matthew, could you put the conditions up on the PowerPoint? Councillor Cook's asked. Oh, actually,
sorry, Councillor Bolton, I think he wants the extra condition added in.
Apologies, Councillor. He read it there. So yes, well, we would include an additional condition which would ensure the wording will be satisfied about future proofing for the electric vehicle charging points. Okay, so does Councillor Gregg have a seconder? No. Okay, so unfortunately, Councillor Gregg, you don't have a seconder. So I think, is there anybody that wants to contribute to the debate?
Yes, I would.
Okay, can I, just before we move forward, Councillor, sorry, Mrs. McBain, could you just, obviously I've moved and I have a seconder, Councillor Gregg doesn't, and I think just for clarity, given that this is being recorded, could you maybe just go through the process of what happens now?
Thanks, Convener. As Councillor Gregg doesn't have a seconder, his amendment falls, therefore the application will be approved.
Okay.
Could I just make the point that that potentially I could raise issues in my amendment that members might agree with, but how will they know until they hear it?
Mrs. McBain, I think, would you like just to address it, just because obviously it's a point of
Thank you. Can I just bring in Mrs. Swanson? Alison, are you there a second?
Afternoon. If Councillor Gregg could state what his amendment was, therefore then the members of the committee would be aware of the terms of his amendment and would be able to determine whether they at that point wish to second it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gregg, would you like
Yes, my amendment, my objection would be on the basis of scale, massing and design, since the proposal would be intrusive and visually invasive, protruding in various impacting from various important viewpoints around the city and in the neighbourhood. I think it's anomalous in heritage terms, and I'm not convinced that the concerns raised by the conservation side were sufficiently covered. I think that they were masked rather than resolved. Those issues about it was admitted in the report that this proposal would radically alter the character of its environment, and I don't think that that was adequately addressed. The city centre master plan allows for appropriate development which will enhance the cityscape, and I don't believe that this is appropriate, hasn't been demonstrated as appropriate development. I also have concerns about the microclimate. There's the admission that this proposal would create adverse winds, adverse climate impact, which would then require a kind of a retrofitting set of solutions. So I don't understand why we would allow that to go ahead. And I think that there's too much latitude given with regard to the parking provision. I think it's too lenient to have such a small amount of parking for around 800 to 1,000 employees. So those are my reasons.
Okay. Members, you've heard from Councillor Gregg. Does anybody want to second him on that basis? No. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Gregg. As I said, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation, which is to approve conditionally and with full consent until the legal agreement is secured. Developer contributions towards the core paths, open spaces and provision of a car club vehicle, along with the conditions, including the additional conditions suggested by Councillor Cook for the extra capacity for the electric vehicle point charging. I think that the report has been put together well. I think, in fact, the point of exposure of this building at various points was well demonstrated by Mr. Easton's PowerPoint presentation. I think, yes, there will be a significant impact down in the green, but I think, as we've heard, that there'll be certainly a compensatory an alignment with the activity that will take place there. It'll make more space on the green. We've seen lots of activities. The green has come back into its own in terms of becoming a destination for things like new art. I think there's been an awful lot of animation taking place there, and I think with a slightly wider footprint, this will be able to escalate. I think design is always difficult, and I think that certainly it was recognised in the report by officers that there was a lot of to and froing with the applicant, which included our conservation planners to make sure that the building wasn't as dense in terms of its massing, with the stepping back on various points. I think the different use of glass and, of course, granite has allowed it to try and blend and reflect the buildings that are around it. I think that on Market Street with the living walls, I think will help actually with the CO2 emissions of cars. And of course, you know, we are trying to move to a city centre where we're less dependent on cars, and with the access of public transport at the railway station and on the buses at the bus station and on Union Street, to get the words right. I think there's an adequate supply of public transport. And I think, you know, when we're constantly talking about a climate emergency, I think it would be irresponsible for us to go up to the maximum of the car parking. So, you know, I was slightly concerned that the terminology you were using, Councillor Gregg, and I know how difficult it is when we're on this new environment, that perhaps you didn't mean lenient. I think you were actually saying that we weren't giving enough parking because you were saying that there wasn't enough for that number of workers. But as I say, I think to fall in line with the aspirations of the city to become less car dependent, but still recognise a level of parking for people, I think the balance is being struck, and I think a lot of hard work and flowing has gone in that particular point with officers. So with all of that in mind, I would just move that the recommendations, and given you haven't a second and it's fallen, I will still ask Ms McBain just to do a roll call to make sure that we are all agreement on this application.
Okay, thank you, convener. So I'll just do the same as I did in the other item. Please just confirm, rather than a vote, because Councillor Gregg didn't get his second out, just please confirm though your intention, approve or refuse. So Councillor Bolton?
Approve.
Councillor Jennifer Stewart?
Approve.
Councillor Allen?
Approve.
Councillor Cook?
Approve.
Councillor Copeland?
Approve.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Refuse.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Approve.
And Councillor Malik?
Approve.
Thank you, members. Therefore, the application is approved in line with the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
And the additional condition, if you could.
Yeah, sorry, an extra condition in regards to electrical vehicle charging points. Thank you.
Quite a mouthful that bit, I know. Thank you, Ms McBain. Right, moving on to item 6.3, which is the erection of a shed at 17 School Avenue. And we have Alex Ferguson, Mr. Ferguson, if you'd like to take us through.
It's actually myself that's presenting, Councillor Bolton.
Oh, sorry, Gavin, carry on.
That's okay. I'll just get the presentation up and then I'll just go through.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go through my presentation first, then I'll go through the slides. The proposal relates to the erection of a shed to be used by one of the ground floor flats within a floor in a block at the northwestern corner of the junction of School Avenue and School Drive. The shed would measure 2.4 metres by 3 metres and an overall height of 2.3 metres. The proposal has been amended since the original submission to increase the distance between the building and the shed from 1.2 metres to 1.7 metres. The proposed shed would replace an unauthorised storage container which sits in an adjacent area of public open space. The proposal has been referred to the committee as 7 letters of objection have been received. The details of the objection are summarised on page 205 of the papers, with the response to any material considerations raised addressed on pages 209 and 210. An evaluation proposal is provided on pages 207 to 210, and it's the view of the Planning Authority that the proposal is of an appropriate scale, design and siting, and there are no material planning considerations that would warrant refusal of permission in this instance. The reason for approval is provided on page 210. I'll now go through the presentation just to give you an idea of what is on site. So, location plan shows the red line boundary. Then we have a Google Street View image just showing exactly where the property is. Then the area in blue on this plan shows the location of the proposed shed, and if you can just see there, it's the 1.7 metre distance between the flats and the building. Elevations of the shed, which shows a standard design shed, which we typically find sort of throughout the city, throughout gardens and properties. Again, an image of the property. This was before the unauthorised storage container was in place. Then we have sort of obviously photographs of the unauthorised container, and the shed would just be located sort of between the container and the property and round about there. So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Members, have we got questions for Mr. Clark on this application? I'm just looking at the chat.
Yes.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, thank you, convener. The question is basically about conditions if we approve this. I mean, obviously this container has just been placed there, I assume, by the applicant, but I have no idea how long it's been there. If we approve this, can we make it a condition? I mean, I know it says in the report that they will take action to have it removed, but can we make it a planning condition that this thing is removed within a certain period of time? And also, could we have a condition that the applicant must seek approval through the sales and consents process through the housing department as well? Because I notice he hasn't got that either.
I don't think that's perhaps. Mr. Evans, would you like to?
Yeah, convener. Obviously, the storage container is subject to a separate enforcement case, which is currently on hold at the moment, pending this application. We've obviously given an informative of 2 months to remove, which we may need to vary slightly, just given the current situation. But if it isn't removed, we would have powers under enforcement rather than enforcement legislation to seek removal of this container, and that would be better to do it that way rather than be a condition, which is separate to this planning application. And then obviously the housing issue is obviously separate, and they would have to get consent. I'm aware housing are aware of the proposal, so I would imagine that would be in place, eventually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Could I just take Mr. Lewis in first, and then I noticed, Councillor Gregg, that you've also asked for a question. So, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, thank you, convener. Just to add to what Gavin has said there, Obviously, what's before the committee today is an application for a shed. We cannot consider the container. Doesn't form part of what the committee actually has before it today. So it wouldn't be competent for us to put any conditions on this application containing something that's entirely separate from the application.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. One of the concerns expressed is the size of the proposed shed. I was trying to visualise the size of the shed, and I wondered if planning officials could indicate whether this is a kind of a standard size of shed or not. They comment that they consider it suitable for the site, but is the size of the proposed shed of a fairly standard size? You know, whatever that is. So,
yeah, we would say it's marginally larger than your standard shed, but it's not overly large, and we consider it to be appropriate. I mean, it's 2 points, so it's just over what 7 foot by 10 foot. I think that's right, 2.3 by 3. So we don't consider it to be excessive for the site, certainly.
Okay, thank you. I was noticing that it's quite an open space, so there does seem to be the layout. There does seem to be ground space for perhaps a slightly larger shed. So thank you for that.
Okay. Can I just ask any final questions? I'm just checking the chat. I have no other questions. Okay, the recommendation is to approve unconditionally. Can we get agreement on that? Is anybody otherwise minded? Okay, again, just because of the process we're going through, I'd just ask Ms. McBain just to do the same call through.
Okay, thank you, convener. So please just state again if you're happy to approve the application unconditionally. Councillor Bolton?
Approve.
Councillor Stewart?
Approve.
Councillor Allen?
Approve.
Councillor Cook?
Approve.
Councillor Copeland?
Approve.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Approve.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Approve.
And Councillor Malik?
Approve.
Okay, thank you. So the application is approved unconditionally.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McBain. Moving on to 7.1, which is Bad Farms. Again, that's Gavin Clark, please.
Yeah, if you just bear with me a second while I get set up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, convener. I'll provide a short run through, and then I'll go through the slides I have for this one. The application site is located approximately 3.5 kilometres northwest of Cooter and to the east of a group of properties at Hillcrest Courtyard. The application site extends to approximately 734 square metres and forms parts of a wider area of unused agricultural land. The proposal seeks permission for the change of use of land to a caravan site for the erection of a 2-bed chalet/mobile home with consent sought for a period of 5 years. The application site forms part of a wider development site for which conditional planning consent was granted in 2011 for a stud farm, residential dwelling and garage with limited works relating that consent having been carried out, including fencing and clearing of undergrowth. This consent remains valid in perpetuity. I previously mentioned that consent and conditions applied to the 2000 permission included restriction on the occupancy of the house to a person employed full-time in a stud farm business and dependents, widow or widower of such a person, ensuring that the stables and associated infrastructure are constructed and available for use prior to commencement of construction of the house and garage. There's been numerous applications since the approval that have sought to remove this condition, which are detailed on page 220 of the agenda pack, but it's noted the condition which they have sought to remove, the occupancy condition, is not sought here, and it's in relation to the stud farm being operational before the dwelling can be built and occupied. The proposal has been referred to the PDMC because the proposal has attracted 6 or more objections from the public and an objection from Cooter Community Council. The application therefore falls out with the scheme of delegation. Community Council's comments and public representation are summarised on pages 221 to 223 and are addressed on pages 230 to 232 of the agenda pack. Consultation responses from colleagues in roads and environmental health have raised no objection to the proposal from either road safety perspective or in terms of drainage water supply to the site. In terms of the principal development, this is discussed in greater detail in pages 224 to 229, but in summary, we would note that this is a new and totally separate planning application which is being considered to the 2011 permission. Permission is being sought solely for a change of use of land to caravan site to allow the erection of a chalet/mobile home, and the proposal must therefore be assessed on that basis. As such, in contrary to what is within the supporting information submitted by the applicants, the proposal is contrary to policy NE2 of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan. While some works, for example, fencing, has been carried out in connection with the previous permissions, there's no existing business or operation on site, and therefore the change of use of land to a caravan site to allow the siting of the mobile home is not deemed as essential for agricultural, woodland, forestry, recreational uses compatible with the agricultural or natural setting, mineral extraction, restoration or landscape renewal, which are required by policy. The condition at the time was implied to ensure that the dwelling house and garage were only constructed in association with the operational business in accordance with Greenbelt policy. The current application seeks permission for a change of use of land to a caravan site for the erection of a chalet mobile home for residential purposes for a period of up to 5 years. The planning, policy and design statement submitted in support of the application states that the chalet/mobile home and infrastructure would be removed after the 5-year period, unless a further application to extend the lifetime of development is submitted. Therefore, there's clearly a risk that an extension could be sought to retain the chalet beyond the 5-year period if the stud farm business is not operational within that time and thus could become a more permanent place of residence. But it's also important to note that both permissions could be implemented simultaneously. Therefore, both the caravan site as well as the stud farm with the dwelling house could be delivered concurrently. There's been no reasonable justification provided which would support the introduction of a residential use at this location. Furthermore, there is no guarantee of the previous permission being implemented, nor any means of ensuring the caravan site is only occupied if the previously approved stud farm is constructed and brought into use. The proposal is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons detailed on page 233 of the report pack. I'll now just quickly go through my PowerPoint presentation. So here's the site to the north west of Peter, just circled with the red boundary. Here we are again, just the site. This is the Hillside Courtyard and the site here, and the area in blue is wider land owned by the applicant. Again, just an overview of the site from Google Maps. This is the steading conversion here. The site sort of here with the land owned by the applicants, just sort of there. And again, I'll just run through some photographs of the site, which just shows its current the current situation on site. So just the key issues, which state that this is a standalone application seeking a change of use to caravan site for the erection of a chalet/mobile home. If granted permission, the change of use to caravan site could be implemented with no obligation to progress the previously approved stud farm and dwelling house. Similarly, both permissions could be implemented concurrently, and occupation of the chalet mobile home cannot be tied to the applicant or the previously approved stud farm and dwelling house. That's all I have, so if I've got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Members, any questions for Mr. Clark? I'm just checking the chat. Nope. Okay, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation, which is one of refusal. Is
Councillor Cook's got a question. Sorry, convener.
Sorry, who's that?
Sorry, Councillor Cook's got a question.
Oh, sorry, I never saw. Sorry, Councillor Cook and Councillor Cook. Do you want to come first?
Okay, if Martin's okay with that. Yeah, I was too slow on the typing. It was just want to kind of almost play devil's advocate in terms of one of the things we seem to be wanting to prevent is the chalet becoming permanent, and there's the report says that there's a risk that could be the case. But if the applicant is genuinely just wanting to have the chalet on site while they build the stud farm, and then it would be removed once the stud farm is taken away, even if they applied to make the chalet permanent, could we not just turn that down?
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, well, as I've sort of said in my key issues, there's no way really of connecting the chalet to the development, and obviously they have requested consent for a period of 5 years, and I think in the officer's assessment they've suggested this should actually be 3 years. So there would be a way of controlling the temporary nature of the building on site, but as we have said previously, there's no way really of connecting the two. So there's no way of connecting this proposal to the previous consent on site.
Councillor Cook? Okay.
So, so we couldn't. What you're saying again is we couldn't legally connect them.
They're two separate proposals, so no. I mean, as I've suggested in my presentation, this could be. Whilst we understand that the applicant owns the site, there's nothing to stop them then running this as a sort of caravan site. So that's what the change of use would be granting for the use of the site as a caravan site. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think yeah. It's just when I first read the report, I thought, yeah, tick box, go with officer's recommendation. When I reread it second time, I just wondered if we were being just a bit harsh. Yeah. I'm wondering if we could go with an approval with the sort of conditions that are specified on page 232. Just before, it's the paragraph just before the recommendation.
I mean, certainly if you're minded to go against recommendation, they have obviously sought consent for a period of 5 years. If you wanted to go with a 3-year period, that would be an option that could go with the consent and with the chalet on site. That would certainly be up to you.
To be honest, I'm not sure. Just almost thinking out loud.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. The report mentions that there is inadequate drainage arrangements in place, and that there would be the use of installing a temporary septic tank. I tried to find out what that means. What is a temporary septic tank? Does it mean that the septic tank would be a temporary structure to be replaced at some point? Or is that a technical term? Thank you. It's the word temporary that I'm struggling with.
I might get environmental health come in just after I've sort of commented on this, but obviously it's a temporary consent that they're seeking. So you would imagine that for the purposes of this, they would put in a septic tank for the chalet that we used for that, and then eventually over time, if the dwelling house would ever built, there'd be a more permanent solution that would need to put in. But colleague in environment health may be able to answer that a little bit better as well.
Mr. Glover.
Hi, convener. Thank you. I was breaking up a wee bit there. Can I have the question again, please?
Councillor.
What is the nature of the temporary septic tank? Is a temporary septic tank, is it permanent and a way of dealing with drainage, which would be long-standing, or will it be replaced at some point? Is it genuinely a short-term and temporary solution? There's a little bit more information.
My understanding is that septic tanks can be permanent. Quite how long their lifespan is, I don't know. I would have thought at the end of its lifespan that could be a couple of decades at a guess, that it would be replaced if it needed to be. So yeah, they have a permanency with them where properties are unable to connect to the you know, the public sewage system.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I was trying to get an understanding if there was the intention to have some long-term drainage structure installed, but that's probably not a matter for our consideration just now. But thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? I'll give you a minute in case somebody for typing. Apologies. Right. No other questions. Okay, right, as I said previously, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation. There was already, whilst there's been some sort of attempt to connect the two applications, the previous one was approved against officer's recommendations back in October 2011 and has failed to fully be implemented other than making it some fencing, etc. So I'm confident that the officers have come to the right conclusion here, and I would just be moving the officer's recommendation. Is anybody otherwise minded? Okay, Ms. McBain, could I get you just to go through the process, please?
Yes, thank you, convener. So we'll just do the same again for this item. So the recommendation is to refuse the application. So if you just please say if you agree with that. So Councillor Bolton?
Refuse.
Councillor Stewart?
Refuse.
Councillor Allen? Councillor Cook?
Refuse.
Councillor Copeland?
Refuse.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Refuse.
Councillor Gregg?
Refuse.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Refuse.
And Councillor Malik?
Refuse.
Okay, thank you. So the item was refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McBain. Right, moving on to the final report of our application, should I say, for today. At 7.2, we have Lucy Green, and that's the land at Inchgarth. Mrs. Green.
Thank you, convener. Thanks. I'll just get my presentation up on the screen.
Thank you.
Is that showing?
Yes, I have it got.
Right. Okay, the application relates to land at Inchgarth Road and is an application for planning permission in principle, with the indicative plans showing 95 residential units, a 50-bed care home, 500 square metres of retail or community use space and public open space, as well as the link road between Inchgarth Road and North Deeside Road. So I'll go through the slides first. So the site lies, as we know, between Inchgarth Road to the south and North Deeside Road to the north. As we've seen on site, there's a significant change in levels across the site. The Deeside Way runs across the centre and is a core path. It's also designated as a nature conservation site, and all the trees on site are protected by TPO. The site also lies within the Foddles Conservation Area, and there is a power line crossing the site along the line shown dashed on this slide, with a pylon located to the south of the Deeside Way, just here. So this slide shows the proposed development with a general picture of the changes in ground levels proposed across the site. Those are shown as the red contour lines. So in order to construct the link road and create development platforms, that change in ground levels is required. The zones of influence of the trees are also shown in red, and the blue circles indicate the root protection areas of the trees. Purple lines, which is quite difficult to see at this scale, but they go along these lines here. Show the locations of proposed tree protection fences. Since these drawings were produced, there have been some adjustments to the detail of the level changes and the tree protection fences in order to further protect tree roots. And the protection fence parallel with North Deeside Road has been moved further south. I'll come back to these in more detail in a moment. So this shows the indicative master plan for the proposal. Area 1 shows detached buildings, each of which would contain 4 to 5 flats with 27 in total. Area 2 shows 16 two-bed semi-detached apartments. Area 3 along Inchgarth Road shows the detached houses similar to those in the area to the north, each containing 4 to 5 flats. Area 4 is where the care home is indicated. 5 is where the 5 retail or community use units are shown. Area 6 is described as amenity units. These are where the affordable units are indicated as being. And Area 7 is 12 two-bed apartments. The yellow dashed line denotes the ramped and level path, with the route between Deeside Way and the North Deeside Road being built on a raised embankment. That's this sort of squiggly line. This slide and the next one show cross sections through the site. So the lower cross section is the site as existing, with Inchgarth Road on the left and North Deeside Road on the right. The top section is between the Deeside Way and North Deeside Road. And then this low one is between Inchgarth and the Deeside Way, just in a bit more detail. So the proposal has been altered in some areas in terms of the platforms, and I've got some more detailed cross sections in a moment. So the steeply sloped ground on the left-hand side of this top cross section has now been proposed as a vertical retaining wall. However, these cross sections give quite a good idea of the changes across the whole site. So these sections cut across east-west across the site as proposed and show the raised embankment for the road and for this slide shows a proposal for how the bridge may look based on the bridge that crosses the Deeside Way at Tokinyell Road. And again, just a reminder that the application is for planning permission in principle, so if it were to be approved, these matters would be subject to further applications under matters specified in conditions. This slide, page 292, shows the junction onto the North Deeside Road, which is, it's not designed in detail at this stage, but it does show the 3-metre wide cycle and footpath on this left-hand side and the 2-metre wide footpath on the other side. So these images show the retaining wall that would be erected to the north of the Deeside Way. This is the Deeside Way. In order to protect tree roots, with the trees on the north side of the Deeside Way. And the wall varies in height, with these sections showing approximately 3.5 metres, approximately twice the height of a typical garden fence. It should also be pointed out that trees are taller than indicated in the cross section, being around 18 metres in height for these two examples. This shows the trees that were surveyed. There are other trees that were not included in the survey, as these were either unaffected or are smaller, below the limit for tree sizes that are normally surveyed. So just to describe the impact on trees, along the North Deeside Road, 5 mature trees would be lost for the road junction. And these are 2 lime trees, beech, 2 Norway maples, and a further 4 for health and safety reasons. Then there's a thicket of blackthorn bushes that would be removed. These aren't included in the numbers in the survey because they're quite small as individual trees. Beech trees along the eastern side of the site would remain but be reduced in height. The report details that the aim of this was to reduce the root protection area required, as the proposal is to construct a turning head within the root protection area by a no-dig method in this area. There were concerns from the council's arboriculturalists that this proposal would not have the desired effect and would result in long-term damage to those trees. So that's where those are mentioned in the report. Trees lost on the D-side way for the road, where it crosses at this point, would consist of 4 larger beech trees and a high number of smaller beech that are not on the survey as their size is smaller than survey size. Trees along the north side of the D-side way further to the east. This is where the proposal is to build the retaining wall along the outer edge of the root protection area, so that would be in this area. Are you hearing me okay? Because it's telling me I've got bad network quality.
You're coming and going, but you're generally okay. Is everybody content that they can hear enough from Mrs.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay. And I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so carry on, Mrs. Green.
Okay.
John.
Within the southern fields in the areas, especially near to the D-side way, there are a large number of semi-mature trees, and these are a mix of birch, sycamore and willow in these areas. Those to the western side of the road, so the road is going across here, they would be retained, and those to the east would be removed. And this is where woodland is in the process of regenerating. So these were the contents of the EIA report, which is described from page 269 onwards in the report, and then evaluated within the report from page 272. The transport assessment was carried out to assess whether the junctions with the proposed road would operate within capacity. So in order to do this, it's assumed that all current traffic on the other nearby routes, so that would be Westerton Road to the west and Pitfoddle Station Road to the east, all that traffic would choose to use a new link road. That's the assumption of the transport assessment. It didn't assess the impact of undertaking the development without the link road. So in other words, just by having 2 cul-de-sacs from the north and south. In terms of the noise survey results, these were based on the traffic noise impact on existing nearby residents and future residents. The recommended mitigation involves 1.8 high fences along the northern parts of the link road on both sides and a 2.4 metre close bordered fence barrier along the boundary on Inchgarth Road. Given that the road would be on an embankment, these would be highly visible from the surrounding area, as well as for road users, especially pedestrians. And the report considers them now not a feature consistent with the conservation area setting. The environmental walkover survey, this identified bats and Lepidoptera as the protected species potentially affected, with other benefits of the site being the provision of foraging and nesting habitat and a large area as a green link, especially relatively close to the city for wildlife. The landscape visual impact assessment was a key part of the EIA report, and this showed the impact on views into and out of the site, which I'll show on slides in a moment. And these are the ones in the agenda pack. For longer range views, one of the drawbacks of the LVIA is working out exactly which trees are lost and how exactly changes in ground levels look from a distance. So just to mention that. So before I come on to the slides from the landscape visual impact assessment, just to look at some of the policy matters. This is taken from the proposed strategic development plan and shows the narrow strip of greenbelt between Deeside and the city, just in here, in the city-wide context. It shows the importance of the Deeside Way as an active travel connection. That's the orange arrow. Thereby emphasising the importance of the setting and experience of users. So this shows the local development plan allocations. The starting point for decision making is the development plan. National policy in Scottish planning policy and the strategic development plan set out the reasons for the Greenbelt to protect the character and landscape setting of the city, to direct development to the right places and to prevent coalescence. These set the context for the Greenbelt in the LDP. So this slide shows the LDP Greenbelt policy zoning on the side. In March, the council formed a settled view on the proposed LDP, and the site remains Greenbelt within that plan. Greenbelt policy does contain exceptions to the general presumption against development. These include essential infrastructure that is identified in the plan. However, the link road is not identified in the existing local plan or the proposed. None of the other exceptions apply to either elements of the proposal. The strategic infrastructure plan, known as the SIP, is a material and is mentioned on page 257 of the report in more detail. It makes mention of the link road. In the context of the proposals for the Bridge of Dee, and work is ongoing on those proposals, as the report describes. So this slide on page 298 of the agenda shows the conservation area boundary with the site located centrally within it. The conservation area's character is inextricably linked to the semi-rural type setting of mature trees, views and glimpses of the river valley landscape. The North Deeside Road, running along the valley and lined with mature trees, narrow side streets and a lack of uniformity in its layout. The loss of a significant area of green space, which is largely bounded by mature trees, and the construction of the proposed link road, which would be 12 metres wide with its pavements and cycleways, and the significant cut and fill proposed to create development platforms, the report considers to be out of keeping and damaging to the conservation area. This slide just shows the locations of the photo montages that I'm about to show you from a number of viewpoints, and these will make up the remainder of the slides. So this is page 300 in the agenda, eastwards along North Deeside Road from outside the northeast site boundary. Sorry.
I unplugged mine.
Sorry.
Don't worry, Mrs. Green. Just
sorry. Right. This slide is looking westwards along North Deeside Road, and you can just see behind the trees that is with the development added. This slide, we're on page 302, shows the existing view in summertime from Inchgarth Road at the point just east of where the road would, proposed link road would join onto Inchgarth. It swings under the pylon lines and joins just to the left of where this picture is taken. So this is the same viewpoint with development imposed. And this view is taken from the south of the river, from Banchory Devenick, and you can just make out the development in the centre there. this is along the Deeside Way as existing from the point where the bridge would be. And then this next slide shows the bridge. And it shows the sort of change in feel on the Deeside Way, the garden boundaries to one side and the retaining walls, which would be behind the trees on the left-hand side. Okay, this is looking along Inchgarth Road towards the west as existing, and then as proposed. And again, this is looking from further west, looking east along the Deeside Way. And again, as proposed, you can just about make out the bridge in the distance there. That's all my slides. So a couple of further points to cover. In particular, just mentioning new pieces of information since the report contains the accident record on page 250 for the 5-year period up to the beginning of 2019, which covers the 2 side roads and this stretch of the North East Side Road. And it identifies 1 serious accident and 2 others on the Westerton Road and Pitfoddle Station Road junctions with the North Deeside Road. That running taking place is an alternative to use of the main route along Anderson Drive and North Deeside Road. Objectors point out that provision of the link road could make the alternative route more attractive. Just on the need for retirement housing, there's no evidence other than anecdotal in terms of the need for retirement housing or care facilities in this area. There are some similar activities existing closer to the village centre in Cults, Brewery Court, Florence Court and Kirk Manor Court. The policy on specialist care facilities is in the proposed LDP and it's outlined in the report, and it identifies 2 criteria. One of these is that such development should be close to public transport and community facilities. And the report states that due to the gradient of the site, these are not particularly accessible, especially to those with mobility impairments. Whilst community facilities may be provided on site, it's unclear whether occupiers could be found or the extent of requirements that could be met on site. The emerging health and wellbeing policy is noted on page 265 of the report, and although an assessment has not been carried out, a health impact assessment, it's noted that access is available to the public under the Land Reform Act onto this land at the moment, and that the link between green spaces, trees and wellbeing is well established. The existing informal footpaths and the Deeside Way provide valuable access to a natural wild space, and these would be lost and change in character as a result of the development. Finally, the healthcare contribution was identified previously and has now been calculated as 105,500. So the proposal is recommended for refusal for the reasons given on page 281 of the report and can be summarised as follows. The proposal is contrary to Greenbelt policy, which seeks to guide development to the right places and protect landscape setting. The proposed link road is part of one option within access to the south proposals, and this is subject to further review and consideration under a separate process. The proposal would result in considerable tree loss and impact on short and long range use. It would have a significant impact on landscape setting and the character of the conservation area, the surrounding roads and the recreational value of the Deeside Way. And finally, that the proposal would be damaging to the recreational value of the Deeside Way, the wildlife links and habitat, to the detriment of recreation and quality of life. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Green. Again, I'll call for questions. I'll give you a minute to type so that I'm not rushing you. Okay, Councillor Gregg, you're first off the mark. Would you like to present your questions?
Yes, please. Thank you. 2 questions, I think. The first is page 279 makes mention of a culverted watercourse. There seems to be some doubt as to whether it exists or not. Is that not a fairly fundamental issue that should be known about? What's the feedback on that? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, there was some discussion with both SEPA and the Council's flooding team on this. There was evidence of a watercourse that may not actually be active any longer, and both of those bodies were satisfied that if the application were to be approved, then as a condition, which would be subject to MSC, there could be a survey which investigated that, and there was a sort of draft plan that showed how potentially a watercourse could be taken through the site. So it was felt appropriate that that could be the subject of a further condition.
Right, thank you. And then the second question is page 249 mentions that there is no play area locally. Is that also a condition that would be proposed to have to require the inclusion of a play area?
Well, I mean, I'm not proposing conditions. I've put a list there, which just reflected really that consultation response. So it would be up to committee to decide whether they, if that happened, whether they wish such a condition to be attached.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. All done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Any other questions? I've only had Councillor Gregg so far. Any more? Okay, because I've got a few, but I don't want to jump in before other committee members. Anything else? No. Okay, can I just ask Mrs. Green, we've talked about building the road over the Deeside Way, and it refers to 4.5 metres above. Would this give sufficient clearance if in the future the Deeside Way returned to a railway line or tram or whatever?
I'm not sure that I can answer that question, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know what clearance would be required.
Well, what do we know how it compares? Obviously, there's a number of roads that cross the Deeside Way. Do we know if it's being considered the same height as those, or it just seems that
it has been considered a similar height to the one at Auchinleck Road. So certainly, if there was a problem with that height, then it would be a wider one than just this site.
Okay, all right, okay. Can I also ask about, and this might be Mr. Lynch that wants to answer this one. It's about the proposed junction. I know that we haven't got a lot of details. We've talked about the North Deeside Road, but on Inchgarth. Now I know that where it's coming out, there's other residential openings, and also another owner who has raised the point that he's concerned that he's not prohibited. There is a gate there that clearly hasn't been used for a long time, but how his access would be incorporated, and also the fact that, my understanding is that we're not looking at perhaps a roundabout, but more of some sort of T-junction type arrangement. Maybe if you could just expand a bit more on that, Mr. Lynch.
Yes, certainly. I've turned my microphone volume up, so I apologise if I'm super loud now, or I don't know. But
just the same.
Oh, well, that's not good. So I guess there was two questions there. One is the type of junction, and the applicant has assessed both a roundabout and a simple priority junction. Just because this is a planning permission in principle, we didn't really want to lock down to either, and I think they were amenable to either, and it was our road construction consent colleagues' preference for it to not be a roundabout, but it's not something that's definitely ruled out at this stage. And certainly the modelling shown highlights that both of these types of junctions do work. So it could be either, to answer that question. And to answer your other question, I'm aware of the nearby resident who was concerned about their access, and they've certainly liaised with us, and we put them in contact with the applicant. And as far as I'm aware, they're all amenable, that there is a solution possible. And certainly I'm sure if this was to go ahead, there would be a planning condition put in place to ensure that people maintain their access requirements.
Okay, thank you. Possibly back to yourself, Mrs. Green. We've talked about the removal of some of what I think we would call the random rubble wall, you know, on the North Deeside Road, and a number of the large trees. But is it possible to retain a section of the random rubble wall if that was possible? I mean, I don't know.
The wall on North Deeside Road, that's a retaining wall, so it would be envisaged that that would be retained, other than where it was required, you know, where the road and the embankments that go with it would require to join North Deeside Road. There are other random rubble walls within the wider site, and those, they could remain in the area to the west, whilst in the remainder they would need to be incorporated into the development and reused within the development. That could potentially be covered by a condition.
I think just picking up on Councillor Gregg's comment in relation to a play park, given that this is for over 50, or the recommendation would be, if it went ahead, was it's a retirement village with an age restriction, would it be appropriate if it to have a contribution, because we have Allen Park, which is quite a natural park, just not that far from the area. Would it be appropriate to seek a contribution for that, as opposed to creating kind of a, I know that in the environmental park, where they mentioned play parks, they were talking of a more natural one, but would it be appropriate to seek a contribution towards Allen Park and keep as much of the area natural, as opposed to any sort of manicuring to provide play parks?
I think if there was sufficient open space being provided on the site, I'm not sure that it would be appropriate to take a contribution for a site out with, you know, out with this site. And I think the comment was really about a sort of environmentally themed sort of area aimed at children, rather than necessarily a conventional play park.
Yeah, okay. And again, you're saying aimed at children, and we're recommending, if we did go ahead with this, that we would put as a 55 restriction. I think, was that similar to something we did, I think, up at Dandara at the Countess Wells Road development?
It has been done previously in various locations.
Okay. Can I check, is there any further questions for Mrs. Green, or roads, or environmental health? My last one is, in terms of, Mrs. Green, you talked about a large kind of fence or something running along the roadside, in terms of to reduce sort of noise from the road. You know, I'm just a bit concerned that we seem to be, and it's not just this application, we obviously heard it with an earlier application, that we're introducing almost massive fences to stop noise coming from the roads. I'm just not quite sure why we're trying to introduce these elements, where, you know, it's a normal background noise that we have along the North Deeside Road, you know, along Western Road, where they're a lot closer, and Pit Bottles Road. So why are we introducing the need for all this sort of mitigation in terms of noise, particularly when cars are meant to be getting quieter, if they're more electric ones anyway?
Yeah, I mean, environmental health could maybe comment further after me, but I mean, I suppose one point to note is that it is planning permission in principle, so, you know, there's the potential for the proposal to change, and the exact requirements could then change. My understanding is that the levels for external areas are recommended by the World Health Organization, and those are the ones we're looking at, so that the traffic noise is such that these noise barriers would be required to mitigate it. The standards obviously changed in terms of existing properties, which were have been in place for some time. But maybe Nick Glover can comment further on that.
Mr. Glover, are you there?
I am, convener. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was the noise impact assessment that looked at the road traffic noise from the suggested route, and where that's closest to the properties, that noise has been shown that it's likely to exceed the World Health Organization levels, as mentioned by Mrs. Green. So that's why they've put forward the recommended mitigation for that.
Okay, I just get a bit concerned we start creating barriers and all our new developments that they're not then integrating into the wider community. Have I got any more questions for any of the officers? No. We have a recommendation from officers, obviously, to refuse the application. I am not moving the officer's recommendation on this occasion. Is anyone minded to move the officer's recommendation? So that, yeah, Councillor Cook. Okay, and has
Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, and Councillor Gregg, you will be seconding him, is that correct? Yeah, okay. Can I first of all obviously find out if I have a seconder?
I'll second you,
convener.
Oh,
I can second, convener.
Okay, that's fine. So I have a seconder. We'll need, Ms. McBain, could I just ask you to outline the procedure now? Because obviously we have a procedure in the committee where if we go against officer's recommendation, that we do take a recess to ensure that the amendment to the officer's recommendation is competent. So could you address that, please?
Okay, so there's a separate, so the legal officer will call up Councillor Bolton as you're moving, different to the officer's recommendation, along with your seconder. So was that Councillor Stewart or was it Councillor Copeland?
Yeah, Councillor Stewart, come forward.
Okay, so we'll just pause the meeting just now, but I'll just read out the statement for the video just so everybody's clear. So please note that Councillor Bolton has moved a motion, and in order to review appropriate wording with officers for her motion, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period. Please note that the recording will continue. Therefore, this is a reminder to all participants to please switch off their microphones and camera during this adjournment. So Councillor Bolton and Councillor Jennifer Stewart will be invited to another call along with legal colleagues who will discuss the reasons, and then you'll return once you've came up with your reasons.
Okay, and that'll also be Mr. Lewis as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So if everybody else just hangs fire here.
Okay, thank you, folks. I'll just put you on mute.
Thank you.
Hello?
Councillor Stewart, if you hold on, I've just gave legal colleagues Alan Thompson your number, so he should be calling you up. So I think if you just hang up from this call just now, and then we can invite you back.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's us. So
Unknown
everybody else just
participant
hangs
is
fire.
now exiting.
Thank you.
Right, folks, I'm back. Apologies for the long delay. I think before we resume, I think it's important that we ask Ms McBain just to do a roll call so that we're all back online. I think if you just a minute, because it's make sure Councillor Stewart is here.
Thanks, convener. I'm just going to dial back in Councillor Stewart, so if we can just hang on a minute, another minute, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just dialing, so hopefully she'll answer.
Okay, thank you.
I'll quickly do a roll call of everybody else. So, is Councillor Bolton, you're present?
Yeah.
Councillor
participant is now joining.
Hi, Councillor Stewart, is that you back? Councillor Stewart? I'll come back to Councillor Stewart. Okay, is Councillor Allen here?
Present.
Councillor Cook?
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Copeland?
Yes.
Councillor Cormier? Sorry, Councillor Hendrickson?
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg?
Present.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Here.
Councillor Malik?
Here.
Councillor Stewart, can you hear me? No.
No. Can we try and reconnect Councillor Stewart?
It's saying that she's currently in the meeting.
Is she on mute?
Councillor Stewart, can you hear me?
Maybe she's on mute.
Oh, wait a minute. She's on mute. Councillor Stewart, can you hear me? I'm trying to.
Okay.
You can call her on her mobile phone.
That is our mobile.
Do you want to disconnect and try again?
I'll remove her and try again.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
So did you hear that? So that should be
Yeah,
her cut off. So we'll try again. Oh, so.
Thank you, folks, for your patience.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Hi, Councillor Stewart, can you hear me?
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart, are you there?
I've got our landline here. Will I just maybe try and hold on?
Yes, that's the option.
Right.
Is that you, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
We're all there.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. So will I hang up on the landline?
Yep, hang up on the landline and just come back here. Sorry about that.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're all present and correct, Councillor Bolton.
Okay, right, folks. So, as I say, I'll be moving approval of the application subject to a number of conditions. Councillor Stewart is seconding me. We have Councillor Cook, who is moving officer's recommendations, seconded by Councillor Gregg. I'll just confirm that that's the position. Yep.
Yep.
Councillor
Yes,
Cook.
that's right. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Excuse me. Thank you, folks. This decision to approve this application, I can assure you, hasn't been taken lightly. It's probably one of my top 5 difficult planning applications to consider. But where I've had to start is there's been a long battle by the community to look at improvements on the road network. And what my concerns has been is that we had a massive amount of development in the Bridge of Dee area, from shopping to DIY shops to universities to tennis sports centres, without adequate, I would believe, infrastructure to feed to it. Now, I think that's clearly demonstrated. If you look along all the roads from Anderson Drive all the way out to Cults, all have speed camming of something, one thing or another. In fact, Station Road has got 2 within a set of traffic lights and speed cushions. So, you know, it's evidence there. And I think even if we look at the report, that there's an acceptance by our roads colleagues that this road at this point will be beneficial to the community of those, particularly on those roads. First of all, I'd like to address the point that it's not included in the local development plan. Now, if you go back to the main issues report, which came out in 2019, there was 633 responses to the city's plan. Now, of that, almost 60% of those representations related to this one site, Inchgarth. 320 of those representations were in favour of the Inchgarth development in one shape or another, and that was partly relating to the retirement village and heavily relating to the link road. We had 8 submissions which were against, obviously, so I think it's fair to say that. This kind of carried on, and one would wonder why I didn't include it in the recent local development plan meeting in March. I had numerous conversations with, obviously, a different part of the planning department to discuss the opportunity to, first of all, create a protected corridor for the road, and to see if we could at least safeguard a piece of land that would allow us to create a link road, which is identified in a strategic infrastructure plan and does have a link to the Bridge of Dee studies, which are still not concluded yet. My original wish would have been that we could have taken a link through the Garthy Farm. However, that was redeveloped, and despite I know numerous attempts by residents and community councils to get a road through there, be the link road at the time of that development, that failed. So, as I say, coming back to the LDP, I couldn't find a way of ensuring that we could get that link road. The other point was, again, I was very keen that, I was very aware that we didn't have capacity at the schools in and around that area, either at a secondary or a primary area level. So it would have been inappropriate for me to zone residential, again, particularly given, on advice of colleagues, I couldn't secure it for the elderly, which was disappointing. So it was my view that it was an important site. However, it would have been inappropriate, given that no guarantees could be to secure that site for what I think all the issues raised by residents and people in their responses to the main issues report had made. We had a predetermining hearing, which again, it was a lot of representations in favour of the link road and of the retirement village. There was quite a lot of criticism that the area was, well, you know, wasn't nice, was run down, etc. I don't agree with that. I think it's a valuable wildlife site. So, you know, I'm not totally disagreeing with some of the comments that our officers have made. However, it comes down to a balance. Now, part of the new Planning Act, which came in, Planning Scotland Act in 2019, actually introduced a statutory link between the development and community planning, and community planning having the opportunity to prepare local place plans. Now, Cults, Beeltside and Multimber are very active in terms of this and have engaged quite widely to make sure that this is a meaningful process and it's not simply written on a piece of paper and ignored by us. You know, and again, I went through their report. Now, in their section, in which they're under current key issues, is links to the Bridge of Dee and the lack of a link road. Now they've identified it as a key project. That's something that requires proposed action, and that comes down to lobbying us and making a case for that. We also, obviously, in the same plan, they recognise the value of green and open space, and that, I totally concur with them on that point. The other point that they have a section dedicated to is the elderly. Now, they again identify that on Lower Deeside we have a higher percentage of elderly living, with around 25% of the population of Deeside being over 65. People want to remain in the catchment area because they have family there. When we're trying to build resilient communities, I think it's incumbent on us to try and reduce the need for car journeys across the city and allow families to support each other far closer to home. And that's regardless of where it is in the city. But I'm looking obviously at Lower Deeside at the moment. So I feel they've done a lot of homework and have identified a lot of issues that gives weight to going against the local development plan. The other thing that, again, that I made sure that I looked at was obviously the AWPR has a suggestion that somehow this was going to be the panacea, all evils, and we would see a mass reduction on other roads. Now, whilst again, I would concede that there has been a huge shift and it's been to the betterment for many people. However, we're still seeing 2,500 cars using Westerton Road. Now, this is a road that has very little in the way of pavement infrastructure. You have houses abutting virtually with a short garden in front. I've had many residents who've been hit by wing mirrors, and unfortunately with sat-nav these days, we still get large Arctic lorries and everything being directed up these roads. We also, I had a look at the data for Pitpoddle Station Road. And whilst we only did the analysis at peak times, if you look at the trends that was given out with those figures, you're looking at around the same number of cars, 2,500, using that road. Now, there's no pavements at the top part. There's very little pavement as you go down. Now, it is the direct access for many students going to Robert Gordon's, getting off the bus on the North Deeside Road. There's no provision for cyclists. We have people, of all ages attending the allotments there. Again, if they're coming by public transport on the North Deeside Road, it's a hazardous journey for them to get down the top half. And for anybody who's used it, they will see the antics of drivers trying to squeeze past each other down that road. So for me, there's a massive safety concern here. We have blind entrances on that road for people trying to come out, and that was explained by some of the residents who came and spoke at the predetermining hearing that we had. So there's many reasons in terms of safety and improved road infrastructure that has tipped the balance for me. I don't believe, or I don't agree, not believe, that there will be a detrimental impact on the Deeside Way. Deeside Way already has houses that abut it all the way along. I think the treatment will be really important in how we deal with it in terms of building infrastructure over it. But again, I think that can be dealt with through matter specified as we go forward. As I say, the elderly, we've seen the information being provided by the Community Council statistics, the analysis of proportion of elderly people. One of the things, again, that the Community Council was keen that we made sure didn't happen was that we just got more of the same standard, I suppose, McCarthy Stone type developments. They were looking at different types of housing that people perhaps could migrate from independent living to the care home and still be within a close distance to their original home. So I think that on balance, and as I say, this has been a very, very difficult application for me. I feel that I need to support my community, support the community plan that my community have put forward, the representations that come through the main issue support. And whilst I didn't feel it was appropriate to put it in the local development plan, I feel that the link road is a strategic infrastructure project for us. As I say, I've already identified that it was included in the SIP in October 2013, approved by the council. And in fact, I remember Councillor McKay, who was being very helpful, trying to include it in his budget one year to get it delivered, the link road. So there is an awareness across council that this road is required. We've seen that from the comments by our road people. You know, we often hear the mantra where infrastructure enables development. Well, for me, this is development enabling infrastructure, and it's development that is required in terms of the type of development. As I say, I'm not going to argue that there won't be a detrimental impact to the conservation area, because it will change it. But again, I think through matters specified and other conditions, which I know the officers will bring forward, we will be able to protect and enhance this. It will be different, it won't be the same, but I think on balance, the safety of the community and their voices being heard and recognised as intended by the new Planning Act, I think it's imperative that I move for approval on this application. And I think I'll just leave it there. Thank you. Oh, before I do that, could I maybe just ask Mr. Lewis to read out the condition? And I would also suggest that the committee that we bring back all matters relating to this planning application, because it is so important that we get it right. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, convener. My understanding was that committee services were drafting up the reasons for the.
No, it's the condition I was wanting you to.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The condition I'm suggesting is that no development shall take place unless there's been submitted to and approved in writing by way of a formal matters specified by condition application, a phasing plan that would secure delivery of the link road, including the bridge over the Deeside Way, public open space and community facilities prior to occupation of the first residential unit on the application site. No residential unit shall be occupied unless the development is being implemented in accordance with the phasing plan and the full length of the link road and community facilities have been completed. And the reason would be in order to ensure that the benefits of the proposal that justify departure from the development plan can be secured.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Can I hand over to my seconder, Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, convener. I think actually you've pretty much covered it all, so I will just use my position to formally second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Councillor.
Sorry, can I come back there? There's also a requirement for a legal agreement to be entered into. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Could I call on Councillor Cook, please?
Thanks, convener. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Councillor
Right.
Cook.
Okay. While I'm sympathetic to what the convener said about the need for a link road, I think there's a difference between having a debate about a link road and a debate about a retirement village. And in my view, I'm more than happy to move officers' recommendations for the reasons set out on pages 281, 282 of the report. I won't spend time going over all of them, but I'll highlight just a couple. Part of the reason for supporting the officer is there are so many conflicts with a number of policies in the LDP. I think in terms of NE2 on the green belt, I just think this drives a coach and horses through it. There are reasons where we do allow development on the green belt, but I think Lucy Green in her presentation set out very clearly that this doesn't meet the relevant criteria that would allow us to do that. And I don't think the link road itself is sufficient for that. When I look at policy NE1 on green space network and the loss of biodiversity, particularly given the number of different species that are on that site, again, it seems to me to be just completely contrary to NE1. I'm also concerned about the loss of 75 trees, contrary to policy NE5. I know we need to deal with each application on its own merits, but I'm mindful of the fact that we've turned down a number of applications in recent months, giving a lot of weight to loss of trees. So that's a further reason. The other point I would add is in terms of the conservation area. You know, sometimes you look at an application that's maybe on the edge of a conservation area and is kind of slightly slightly at odds with it, but you could maybe call it either way. Looking at this one, again in Lucy's presentation, was the slide on page, you can find it, page 298, the slide there. Basically, it just strikes me that this is so much of the area of the conservation area is affected, and to such a degree, you might as well not have that conservation area at all. So yeah, as I say, for those reasons, in a nutshell, that's why I'm moving officers' recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Gregg.
Yep, thank you. I also agree with the officers' recommendations. I think that the green belt policy is a real core of our local development plan, and the page 273 does mention that there are no reasons to actually support deviating from the green belt policy in this case. There are important nature conservancy features in the area. The loss of the trees would not only be detrimental for
Somebody flicking stuff. Sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor Gregg. I don't know if it's you, it's flicking, but whoever is, can they stop? Carry on, Councillor Gregg. Sorry.
Yeah, in terms of nature conservation, the loss of 75 trees is not only undesirable in ecological terms, but there was also commentary on the potential that land could be destabilized because the root protection is so important. The green space network and our open space policies are really important to us in order to provide good quality living and transport opportunities for residents, and that's obviously going to be compromised by not just building in green space and up against the Deeside Railway, but also by the building of the bridge. So these, I mean, we're looking at the building of 95 residences, a 50-bed care home, 500 square meters of commercial space on the green belt. I find it really worrying that we could be considering overturning our policies because of that. We also have a duty to, when we build houses, to ensure that they are of good quality and that they're in good places. And the report does mention that because of the density of some of the dwellings, because of the constraints on space, the small spaces, the houses would be compromised by having to be located in very small areas, and they would also be affected by noise pollution. So I think that that's not a good way forward when we're trying to make sure that we have good quality housing. On the subject of the road, at the predetermination hearing, there was a very strong desire expressed for this road. And I appreciate and I sympathise with the concerns of the residents in the parallel roads who are at risk clearly every day, particularly Westerton Road, who are at risk. But I don't believe that building a road through private development is the right way forward. We have underway the strategic infrastructure plan, and that includes access from the south. So we're already considering what we can do as a council with our partners to make sure that we can find a way of building some kind of north-south road that will reduce the pressures on those other roads in Cults and Pitfoddles. I understand that when you build a new road, it attracts vehicles. So I think that the strategic infrastructure plan is the right place to be considering where and when and how we build any new road in that area, because we need to have a full and adequate assessment of what are the implications of attracting more vehicles into this road. I would want to see an assessment, for example, of what would be the impact on Westerton Road and Pitfoddle Station Road of a new road, which would perhaps be encouraging HGVs and so forth to come along Inchgarth Road and up that road, because obviously there is displacement of traffic. Traffic disperses, so this new road might not be the favoured desire line for traffic. So I think that it's the council's responsibility to be finding a solution to the problem that residents have identified, not the planning system. So for these reasons, I'm supporting the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Greg. Could I ask others who wish to join the debate, if you could indicate in the chat and I'll take you in.
Convener, I want to come in, but as I've said before, I'm not sure how to do the chat thing.
That's okay. Please come in, Councillor Allen.
Okay, thank you. I want to address more. I've heard enough about the roads and the issues that's involved there. I want to address more the whole concept of this village for the elderly. I know in my own ward, the people there like to stay where they know and where they've lived for a long time. And as you get older, and I'm one of them, your faculties do go. And if you can rehome to a nice place, a laid out proper facility in your own area that you have known for years, while that faculties may be wandering a bit, I think that's an excellent idea. I think we are a wee bit behind in this country with this concept of elderly villages. I think it's an excellent concept. I've certainly looked at the before and after pictures on that South Road, which I do travel, I do know the area. And the after picture is really looking to me very acceptable. And the whole concept of this village certainly appeals to me. So I will be supporting you, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I've got Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Convener. I'm going to support you on this one. I think the things you said were very pertinent, and I do believe that the benefits far outweigh the detriments on this. Councillor Allen made a very, very valid point regarding elderly people, and I'm headed towards that myself, being in their own areas and being familiar with things. And I think that developments like this, specialised developments like this, are something that we sadly don't have many of in this city. And I think this is a very important step to recognise this fact and cater for, our job to cater for all the population, not just some. And I think this goes some way to addressing that. As far as the road goes, this is something we very badly needed for a number of years. As you said yourself, other developments along Garthy Road, the shops and the Robert Gordon's expanding and the gym and things like that has resulted in a lot of traffic on there. And I'm sure Councillor Gregg's point about the big lorries using this road, I'm sure a weight restriction or something can be put on it to prevent that. So all these things can be dealt with at the next stage of the planning process to do it. So I will be supporting you, and I think this is something that's been long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Convener. I'm really just disappointed that the officer has recommended this application for refusal, as the vast majority of the community that I represent are desperate for this application to be approved, as they all want new links road. I appreciate this application is more than just about the link road. Report said it is about providing residential-led development for the retired elderly, which would include affordable housing, 50-bed care home, and retail unit, and a community use space, public open space, and associated infrastructure, and link road, of course, between Inchcourt and Northside Road. Carlsfield Side Multiple Community Councils supportive for this application, and there are far more led in support of this application than against the application. The link road was policy commitment of the council and was part of the strategic infrastructure in 2013. This application, in my view, is important for the city and vitally important for the community I serve. The proposal includes 25% affordable zone and much needed, of course, link road, and also bring the life area of the green belt, which is currently inaccessible for the public to the life, for the enjoyment of the city. It also provides houses, especially for those over 50, as well as care home and retail unit. In my opinion, this is very, very good development, and I will be supporting the application subject to the agreed section 75. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mackenzie, please.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Mackenzie.
Whilst I'm never in favour of cutting down mature trees, I think that the safety of local residents and local community is more important. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody that wants to come in that hasn't come in? I think we've all perhaps participated. Anyone else? Councillor Hendrickson, I haven't heard from you. Are you okay?
I'm okay, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. I don't want to miss anybody out. Okay, if there's no further debate, we'll go to summing up. Given I'm the convener, I get the final words, Councillor Cook. So would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Camilla. Yeah, I'll be very brief. Listen, I'm sympathetic to all of the arguments around the road safety issue. I'm sympathetic to Councillor Allen's point about the fact that older folk prefer to stay where they've stayed for most of their lives. Yeah, I, in principle, support this type of development. My only problem is this specific application in this specific location is just, to my mind, contrary to too many of the policies in the local development plan. So if it was something slightly different area, I might be minded to support it, but I just think the officers got it dead right in terms of the interpretation of planning policy. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. And as I started off my kind of moving approval of this has been an extremely difficult application for me to determine, because, you know, I can absolutely see many of the points that officers have made, but it's always down to what weight you want to give to things. Now, part of the green belt is if there's infrastructure, that's a reason that you can come through it. Now, the weight I've given the link road, with it having been included as this strategic infrastructure plan, the feeling of the community council, the planning bill, the Scottish planning bill that just came through, which again asks us to give consideration to our community's plans. You know, I don't feel that I would be acting or I feel that I need to act in the best interests and weighting it in the way I have. We have seen other areas where, you know, not trying to name other things, but Kingsford Stadium, you know, that was green space, green belt, open green space network, but, you know, we were happy to put a football stadium there, you know, and for me, the benefits to the community were zero, quite the reverse. So, you know, there is precedence where, you know, we're happy to change policies to suit circumstances. You know, we've seen other houses built along the Deeside Way, you know, closer than these are proposed. You know, I think we've got to be pragmatic with some of our decisions and weight it with everything in mind. I am absolutely, I'm not ashamed to say it, a bit of a tree hugger. I love trees and would not easily take trees down. And I think part of the development of the site will to see, I think, a woodland perhaps created in some of the open area. I think that would be highly desirable. But these matters will come back, and you know that's why I've asked the committee to agree with me that we'll bring every matter back to the committee, because I don't deviate from the local development plan lightly, and I think anybody who knows me, having been on planning for 12 years, you know, I do try to make my decisions aligned to that. As I explained, I couldn't manage to secure what I wanted to secure through the local development plan, and given it's such an important site, I felt it was more appropriate not to do anything rather than to do the wrong thing at that stage. What we have to consider as well is, you know, this development will not sit in complete isolation. It abuts the houses to the east of the site, but yet stops correlation of the whole area by creating a green belt down the west side, which I think will help with the biodiversity of the area. And I think certainly knowing our environmentalists, they will certainly be all over this report to make sure that we put in measures to protect and facilitate any other improvements that we can make to the biodiversity. So landscaping is going to be absolutely essential. As I say, I'm not going to dispute some of the impacts on the conservation area or to some of our reports, because I do think it's oops, can you see me? Something disappeared. Yeah, that they are of merit. However, it's all about balance, and on this report, subject to the conditions and the legal agreements that I've already brought forward with this, and the fact that we will be bringing it back, I think gives us the opportunity to deliver a scheme that over time will develop and look like it's been part of the landscape for a long time. That would certainly be my aspiration. And at the same time, give peace of mind to the people living on Pitfoddle Station Road and Westerton Road that, you know, that they can step out of their house without potentially being mowed down by one of the 2,500 cars that go down there every day. I think, you know, I've probably said everything that needs to be said, you know, and I think Councillor Cook and I are usually very closely aligned, I think, in our way of thinking. I think we can understand both points of view here. We might be on the opposite side of the argument, and I would say the same to our officers. I think we all want the best for the city. On this one, we've maybe just got a slightly different point of view. So with that said, I'll ask Mrs. McBain just to take us to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to approve the application and an amendment in the name of Councillor Cook to refuse the application. I'll just read out the reasons for approval. That the application be approved conditionally, as a proposal would result in the provision of much needed retirement housing in the area, which has a high proportion of retired people, and that there would be community benefits delivered by the link road in terms of the community facility and reduction in traffic and associated improvements to road safety, congestion and amenity on adjoining residential streets. The link road is considered to be supported by the access from the South Study and the Strategic Infrastructure Plan. It is not considered to be detrimental to the amenity of the Deeside Way. Subject to conditions and legal agreement, these material considerations outweigh the relevant green belt and other relevant planning policies of the adopted local development plan. And I'll just read out the condition. That no development shall take place unless there has been submitted to and approved in writing by way of a formal matter specified by condition application, a phasing plan that would secure delivery of the link road, including bridge over the Deeside Way, public open space and community facilities prior to occupation of the first residential unit on the application site. No residential unit shall be occupied unless the development is being implemented in accordance with the phasing plan and the full length of link road and community facilities have been completed. And this would be in order to ensure that benefits of the proposal that justify departure from the development plan can be secured. Hold on one second. I've just got one other thing to add. Also, that the application would be brought back to committee, so we'll be removing the delegated power, and for subsequent MSC applications to come back to Plan and Development Management Committee. So hopefully that's... Sorry.
Just to intervene there, because I was just thinking that the committee needs to agree that the legal agreement is entered into as per the officer's report resolution to approve to do with affordable housing and retirement living as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully everybody's clear on that. So could members please vote motion to support the application and amendment to refuse the application? Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Motion.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Copeland?
Motion.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Motion.
Is that motion?
Yes.
Councillor Gregg?
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Okay. The vote, the application is approved, 7 votes to 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. And as I say, thank you to Mrs. Green, who managed this application. I know it was a very difficult one for everyone involved. So thank you, committee. If we could just carry on to the next part of the agenda, which is other reports. Mr. Clark has done a power of work with his enforcement annual report, and I'll just ask him to come in to give us a brief presentation and take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be quick here. I thought I'd provide you a brief update on enforcement work within the last reporting period, which was from the 1st of April 2019 to the end of March 2020. We've had 216 reported planning cases in the last year, with 74 of these still under investigation. 11 enforcement-related notices were served, with 4 in the process of being served. You may also note that enforcement is now a fully delegated power, which was agreed at the last full council meeting in March. A significant issue within the reporting period has been the prioritisation of action in relation to Union Street, relating to the Union Street Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme. This has led to 30 active enforcement cases in relation to various buildings. Details of all cases are provided in Appendix 1. We've also updated the Planning Enforcement Charter last month, and a copy of this is provided in Appendix 2. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions for Mr. Clark? Watching my chat. I think everybody's exhausted, Mr. Clark, but you know, it was a very interesting read your report, and I'd just like to thank you on behalf of the committee for all the efforts that you've gone to deliver the enforcement, because I know it's not an easy job to do, but you've done it incredibly well, and thank you very much for the update on the charter. Has anybody got anything they want to ask? No? Okay, the report is there for us to note. Can we note the report? Great.
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to 8.2, which is the predetermination hearing report. Mr. Thompson, do you want to give us a quick review of that?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I don't intend to speak for too long. I just want to give you a very brief overview. As the committee will be aware, legislation changed recently, and part of that was removing the requirement for the council to determine certain hearings that have been subject to predetermination hearing. Through the scheme of governance review that happened recently, the council therefore delegated these types of determinations to PDMC, as demonstrated by the 2 that you've just done. However, there may be circumstances where it would be better governance for full council, possibly, to determine a predetermination proposal. So therefore, this report is recommending, for reasons of increased scrutiny and transparency, that additional governance step is inserted, where when a predetermination hearing is triggered, a report will be prepared for this committee, asking you to determine what the appropriate forum is, and also in certain cases if there's a need for a predetermination hearing anyway. We don't anticipate too many of them that will be recommended for full council. Of course, that's not for me to say, We think the majority will be done by the PDMC committee. It's just an additional level of scrutiny and transparency. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Thompson? No, again, thank you very much, Mr. Thompson, for it. I think actually it's a welcome intervention as part of the Planning Act, because I think, you know, no disrespect to our fellow councillors that sit in the full council, but we do have a regular overview of planning applications in terms of being able to apply the relevant policies. Some might not agree at the moment, but, you know, I do think it's a welcome move, and really the recommendations are there. Can I just get agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Thompson, for that. Right, that's the all reports completed. The date of the next meeting is Monday, the 1st of June at 10 AM, which is highly likely to be on a similar platform, although who knows where we're headed. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone that's been on the call today for your professionalism and courtesy that we've shown each other. I think it's, you know, for me, the integrity and the professionalism of the planning department and the committee working together. We might not always agree, but the level of respect that we show each other is incredibly important. I'd just like to thank Gail Beattie for her leadership over all of this, because she's done an amazing job to keep everything going, as well as being dirt on the COVID-19. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks, Alan, for this report. Thank all the officers, and I must take my hat off to Democratic Services for their patience and making sure we're all up to speed. And I have myself at the top of the list there, because I'm not the best techie out. But thank you all for participating today, and I hope you found it not as stressful as I first thought it might be. We'll be the first committee that has gone through this process. But once again, thank you all, and I hope you all keep safe and well. Thank you for today, and that's the business concluded. And just to confirm that the meeting has been concluded and that the recording will be stopped. And for those who take to look at this, thank you for your interest in the business. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, can I just say, I think you've made history, so I think you've handled it very well, albeit that it's been long, but I think you've done very well. And if we were all together, it would be, I was going to say a group hug, but I think you deserve a clap, so well done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. I appreciate your kind words. As I say, for me, it's all about the team, and I think we've done well today, so well done, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll just confirm that the recording is now going to stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.